I know that Paula is presenting testimony. David Gardner, who's our Deputy Commissioner, will be presenting testimony. Darcy Hardy, who was the Executive Director of the Telecampus and who is now working for Department of Labor, will also be presenting testimony, as will, I believe, Mark Milliron from WGU Texas. Those meetings are webcast, so if you would like, you should be able to go online and watch it. A couple of other things, though, that you need to be aware of. Much as we anticipated as we go into this next session, there is a lot of interest in distance education. The Legislative Budget Board has been working with the coordinating board and is conducting a study of community colleges and distance education. The auditors did the study of universities and distance education last year, or earlier this year. So the LBB is doing one now. If you've not received already a survey from them, I'm giving you, those of you at the community colleges, a heads up that you will be getting a survey from the LBB. They ran the survey past us. We gave them a few suggestions. We also have provided them with the semester credit hour data from the last several years for the community colleges. And the survey instrument, at least the version of it that I saw, the focus looks like it's going to be asking about budgeting, demand, learning management systems, contracts, those sorts of issues. But for those of you on the community college side, it's coming. It's not the auditors, but it's the LBB. In addition to that, we've been talking to the Comptroller's office, and the Comptroller is also working on a report on distance education, both universities and community colleges. It's not clear what the focus of that report's going to be at this time. I believe there's a lot of interest on their part in the number of programs that are being offered online. In the case of both the LBB and the Comptroller's office, and this was the case with the Auditor's office as well, they're mostly interested in online options, not as interested in face-to-face and electronic to group. So be aware, too, that we've got the Comptroller's office working on a report. I don't think they're going to be doing any surveying of y'all. We have been requested and have provided them with data, semester credit hour data, as well as the programs being offered online and the institutions that are offering those. But again, just as we anticipated, as we're moving into session, distance education is eliciting a great deal of interest, and I anticipate that that will continue as we move into session itself. A lot of the discussion so far seems to be around the issue of cost efficiency. It's no surprise to you, I'm sure. And then that leads me to the next point, which is the Rider 57 report. By this point, all of your institutions should have received the reporting mechanism that's associated with Rider 57. We have, to this date, only gotten one back. You have until August 1st to remit them to us, although we would certainly be greatly appreciative if you got them to us sooner, because we will only have a few weeks to work with that data and create a draft report before it has to go to our board. I know that there are still a number of questions about that. The instrument that we sent out is a fairly broad and general instrument. It ended up being that way after the discussions here and with some other folks around the state. The questions that I've heard the mostly are, how do you want us to calculate cost? And my response is the best that you can. There is no one methodology that we're requiring that you use, because we're aware that there is no one methodology that's going to fit every institution. What we do ask, though, is there is space on that form for you to explain your methodology. So we need to make sure that whatever methodology you use to calculate cost, that you adequately explain to us how you calculated it, what that methodology is. And that will provide us with the background information that we need. You're looking at the 4 most popular programs. It's up to you to determine how you define popularity. The writer was actually very specific that it was up to the institutions to determine how they define popularity. Again, however you wish to do it, that's your prerogative. We've provided space for you to explain how you reach that decision, so just please make sure that you explain how you determined popularity. There's also, if you notice, space on there. If you believe, we are asking you if you think that it's appropriate whether or not that program be offered online, because you may very well believe that it's inappropriate. I think this is especially going to be an issue at the health-related institutions. The writer, though, does not allow for that, but we want to make sure, though, that if you're giving us the cost of a program, if you believe that it's not an appropriate program to offer online, we want to make sure that we know that. So you still have to go through the exercise of telling us how much you think it would cost, but there is space for you to explain why you believe it would be an inappropriate program to offer online. And we realize that not every program should necessarily be offered online and would be a good fit. And we want to make sure that we're able to accurately represent that information in the report that we end up preparing. I've been asked what we're going to be doing with this information, and I know that for many of you there's some hesitation in filling it out unless you know what we're going to be doing with it, because that might, shall we say, color the way that you fill out the form. To be perfectly honest with you, what I believe that we will be doing is taking that information, and I'm going to be looking for patterns in terms of which programs are being identified as the most popular programs at institutions. I suspect that we will see some overlap there. So I'm going to be looking at identifying patterns of which programs are coming up. Which programs seem to be the institutions believe lend themselves to being offered through distance education better than others. And then also taking a look at those programs that are reported and seeing how they match with current offerings that we have in distance education. And then we will be looking at cost to the extent that I look at it to see what the general types of costs are that are associated with a particular degree and what the range of costs might be for offering that degree online. At least that's the intention right now. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of how we anticipate using that information. Any questions about Rider 57 or the LBB or the Comptroller's report?
Van, when the universities are looking at baccalaureate programs, for example, historically, because of the way we've partnered with community colleges, we've really not focused on developing lower division courses online. For the purpose of this activity, is the assumption that we're going to develop the entire 120 hours for a baccalaureate program, or do we use community colleges as a leverage point as we factor cost?
I think it's up to you, Marshall. If your institutions have a history of partnering with community colleges and that's how you would develop the program out, then what we're interested in seeing is as accurate as possible a portrayal of how you would be creating the program and the costs associated with it. So if the pattern is to work with a community college there, then yes. But please indicate that in your methodology, that it doesn't include undergraduate courses because those would be developed in partnership with a community college. Yes, Matt.
Yeah, just for clarification, it's my understanding that our health science center has contacted the board or perhaps you, and was proposing only listing or identifying two programs, and they were told that they have to do 4. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So Okay, and I know it's not the board or the staff of the board.
That's the language in the rider.
But everyone has to do
Everyone has to do four.
and do 4 feasibility studies.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
And that's the language in the rider. We included in the letter in the cover letter and the instructions that were sent out with the report, we included verbatim the language of the rider, and the rider unfortunately does not. It makes no allowances for those sorts of things. It says very clearly every institution must do 4.
Okay.
So
No less and no more.
no less and no more. Please, no more. Please no more.
I think that's what the institutions are saying too.
Yeah.
And also, as a comment on Marshall's comment, I think you'll find, and this is just a guess on my part, but I think you'll find that many of the community colleges, of the 4 programs, one of them will be the core curriculum. The core curriculum certificate or core curriculum, whatever it's called there. And that will probably serve as the lion's share of what the community colleges are already contributing to, obviously already contributing to what you're providing in your 3rd and 4th years of the college. And then as community colleges also begin to work towards associate degrees, you'll see a little bit more specific kinds of things that are tailored to transfer at the 4-year schools as well, but including the core at the same time.
Any other? Yeah, Mark.
I had a couple of folks ask me about the data questions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in the spreadsheet itself, it asks about overall GPA and then breaks it down into face-to-face or face-to-face online and then online. With their data systems, they said that goes beyond their capabilities to be able to go through and figure out which students did the online and what the GPA, or for that matter, anything else might be for that one line that if they had any students that fell into the online only. So their question was, what do we do on the spreadsheet because we just can't get the data?
If there are points on the spreadsheet where an institution is unable to provide the data because it's just simply not available in the way that their system operates, they need to indicate that.
Okay.
So in that case, they would go ahead and provide the GPA, but they would point out that it is a GPA of both face-to-face and online, and that their system does not allow them to disaggregate it.
Right.
And again, we anticipate that we're going to see some of those responses. It's, as you all know, the reporting methods that institutions are using vary from institution to institution. Even within systems, we have different versions of learning management systems and student information management systems. And the ability to really disaggregate some of that data is directly linked to the type of student information management system that an institution is using. And for those institutions that are still using an older system, they may not be able to do that. And we know that, unfortunately. So just indicating the information that they do have, and when they don't have that information, indicating why they don't have that information.
And it may not just be a technology-related difference or an LMS-related difference. The big issue that I think we've run into in the several meetings that our group has had already on this, because we're well on our way to do it, but at the same time, we keep on running into the question is how detailed do we get in our cost estimates?
Yeah.
How far down do we dig? How deep? And it's hard in several different categories to say here's where we're going to draw the line. But that's going to have to be something. At least we're recognizing that at HCC, but that's something that every institution is going to have to say, okay, here's where we draw the line. We're not going to get down to X level of minutia. We're going to stop at Y or whatever the case may be. But that issue seems to come up in just about every category of trying to respond to the spreadsheet, which is, again, where the information section, where each institution fills in a rationale and an explanation as to why they're doing things the way that they are, is an excellent opportunity to explain that and say, this is where we've drawn the line and this is why.
Yes, Matt.
I have an unrelated question on another topic whenever the discussion concludes.
Okay.
So I wasn't sure if you were done with your report or not.
Well, I've got one other piece that I need to talk to you all about, and that is out-of-state distance education notification. because I know that there have been a number of questions. But before I do that, if you guys would pass your lunch money to the sides, please, so Cindy can pick it up. So I know that I have fielded a number of calls and questions from folks about where we are with a potential reciprocity agreement. As some of you may know, SREB, Southern Region Education Board, has proposed a reciprocity agreement for its members based upon inclusion in the electronic campus. The way that the draft of that agreement reads right now, an institution would be eligible for reciprocity if the programs were in the electronic campus, if the state has signed on to the reciprocity agreement, and if the program does not trigger the definition of physical presence in another state. So basically, if your program is in the electronic campus and it doesn't trigger Tennessee's definition of physical presence, then you would be considered an exempt institution in Tennessee. Now, as many of you know, the definitions of physical presence are as varied as the number of states and territories. The other issue, though, that is problematic with the SREB agreement as of right now, and this might change, is that it does not look like that Texas will continue its membership in SREB. Right now, we do not have the money to pay our dues. And I'm going to be very blunt with you. Last year, we didn't have the money either. The coordinating board has been paying the state's dues for SREB, which is a little over $190,000 for the entire state, and it's been taken out of our general revenue stream. And it has always been taken out of our general revenue stream. When we underwent the same sort of cuts that everybody else did year before last, we lost over 15% of our budget. That meant that we had to take a long look at what we would use our resources for. And very simply put, we don't have the money in our budget to pay those dues. Last year, the Texas Education Association pitched in and paid the majority of the dues. However, that was a one-time deal. So as of right now, it doesn't appear that we will continue membership. Now, I say as of right now and appear because this is an issue that the commissioner is well aware of. Dr. Stevenson and I spoke with Dr. Paredes week before last. He understands about the reciprocity issue. He understands the issues that our institutions are facing, and there's a great deal of concern about that. We're trying to talk to SREB to see if there's an arrangement that we can reach, to see if there's something that we can do. But at least right now, it's unclear whether or not we will remain a part of SREB. So it's unclear whether or not folks will have that as a reciprocity option. There is a national reciprocity agreement on the table. That's the SARA agreement. I think most of you have probably seen it. For the most part, nobody is taking it seriously as an agreement that anybody is trying to really work with. That was created really to fulfill the obligations of a grant that Lumina had made in terms of what a draft national agreement might look like. Probably the best course of action right now is you may have seen a couple of weeks ago that the state higher education executive officers and the AAPLU, I think, joined together to form a joint committee to look at out-of-state distance education and reciprocity. And so they're going to be taking the lead on national agreements. Right now, it appears that a national agreement is most likely to come as a result of regional agreements. Most of the regional groups are in the process of trying to create reciprocity agreements. And I think that the lines that look like are evolving is that the regionals then will work with each other to try to create a national agreement. So that is, though, still a ways off. I'd say that's probably at least a year or so out. If you haven't already gotten on the listserv, you can jump onto SHIO's site, and I think you can get onto their listserv where they're sending out different memos and announcements regarding national reciprocity and out-of-state distance ed. But that's where we are right now with that. As soon as we have a better idea of what's going to happen with SREB, I'll let you know. But that's the only news I have for you this morning.
Would it be appropriate to ask the other institutions just how they're coming along with authorization?
Yeah, I think
is that a fair question?
I think that's I think that's a good question.
Is there?
So, are there folks here that want to share how things are working with them, or are folks pretty much at a standstill?
Well, we have at least gone as far as writing to all the states, and we have received, at the last count, responses from 41 states. The majority of them really indicating that there would be no requirement for us to do anything if we were not going to have a physical presence.
In our case, we had I think 12 students that were out of state, and they comprised a cluster of 6 states. And we wrote to the 6 states, and we received responses very much like Kingston on all 6, except one of them required that a form be filled out and signed by the president and sent off to them, and then we received a letter back in acknowledgement and receipt and saying that we were exempt from their statute.
And our experience has been very similar to what you described. We did not see a huge number of states represented by the students who are from out of state, and we had the same experience. We wrote to them and pretty much received the same kinds of responses that Kingston did too.
We're running about 200 or so out-of-state students that are very scattered. And we sent letters 2 years ago to every state and are finding about 37 states, but we're down to about 10 that either are extremely expensive or extremely difficult. And we're looking, if we've got one student that's certainly not worth $10,000. And some of their accounting, where you're giving a percentage of tuition from students that came from that state, the man hours behind the accounting makes it not feasible to do. So we're in that point of deciding if those states are states that we're going to absolutely not accept.
On the call, including you. You are joining your conference as the host. For a menu of available commands, press *#.
Go ahead, Paula.
I've been hesitant to decide that.
Department of Bilingual Education.
Hey guys, this is the coordinating board. If we could get you guys to just hold on for just a moment, please.
Okay.
We're finishing up some business right here, but we'll be right with you. And you might want to mute on your end too, please, because there's about a 3-second delay.
Anyway, we have put off that decision. Maybe you're going to make it in January, I feel, that we absolutely are not going to accept students from those states because there's no way. But I've been watching and listening to hopes of reciprocity and trying to wait and see if that is actually going to come together.
And just out of curiosity, are you finding of those 10 states, I'm guessing North Carolina, Alabama, and Georgia are 3 of those?
Kentucky, Arkansas, which is a shame because it touches Texas. Kansas is very difficult.
Okay.
And North Carolina.
Okay. Other reports on how reciprocity's been going?
Yeah, at Blinn College, we have nearly 18,000 students, and last time we ran the report, we had 7 students last fall who were out of state. So that's the good news. The bad news is 2 of those students are from Massachusetts, of all places. So, for most of the administrators, when you talk about the other states' rules, first there's disbelief. And then second, there's the how much. And then who's going to do all this? And then the ultimate question, who's going to pay for all this? Do we just transfer that $10,000 or $20,000 fee directly back to the student? And, I don't think they want to pick up a $20,000 price tag for 6 hours of credit. So basically the decision is, if it comes down to it, then we just won't let students from any of those other states register for our courses. So, again, unfortunate set of events, but that's how it played out for us.
This is Patrick Plush, University of North Texas. Our experience has been very similar to Paula's. In particular, our students are scattered all over, similar number of students, and so you do have to, case by case, go through and make judgment calls. We haven't made any decisions not to deliver to any states yet, but that remains a possibility just because of how expensive it is, especially when you get into those that want a percentage of revenue from that student. So I am very concerned, as I'm sure many people are around the table, about two things that were said kind of in conjunction there. One, if we're not a member of SRC going forward, and that national reciprocity agreements are going to be built on regional agreements. So I kind of wonder if there's some other regional agreement that's less expensive than SREC that coordinating board might pursue.
And we're looking into that, Patrick. That's something that we're looking into to see if there are other options.
Great, thank you.
And I do want to underscore that the commissioner is very aware of the issues of reciprocity and out-of-state distance education, and it is something that he has expressed concern about, and it's on everyone's radar here. It's just unfortunate that with the cuts that we've taken as an agency, and because we never received a specific line item for that funding, that it got cut, and we've had to make some very hard decisions about how we bring the agency's resources to bear for the state. I would ask you that as your institutions move forward, if you would continue to let me know those states that you do have significant problems with. That's helpful information. We do have a clause in our rules now that allow us to engage in reciprocal arrangements. And so there's certainly nothing that would preclude us from potentially approaching a state on its own to enter into an arrangement. So if we know what the most difficult states are, then if we do go that route, at least we know where to start.
Have there been any discussions about Arkansas, since it does touch our border?
This is the first time Arkansas has come up as being problematic, so I think probably you and I need to have a conversation about exactly where the problems are, because if it is a problem state and because it is adjacent to us, that is something that we're going to want to probably try to talk about.
We have students in Texarkana that are they're either at a school that's on the Arkansas line and their residence is on the other side of the line, or vice versa, and so that's been a state that's been, we really would like to have relationships with.
Let's make sure that we talk to them, Paula.
This may be good or bad news, but Arkansas is one that on their own adopted an exemption if you have SREC membership and list your programs. So, and it may be something that they introduced after you originally contacted them, so you may want to check that again. But again, that exemption may be kind of tentative given the outcome of the coordinating board's decision around membership.
So I'm sorry it's not any better news. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news here. But please know that we are working very hard to try to find a way to make this work, and the commissioner is aware of the issues that are at stake and the difficulties that you're experiencing. Okay. That's all on our end.
Okay, thank you, Van. We are now going to move on to it's on the agenda is item number 3, which is a discussion of the proposed distance ed doctorate of education with a major in supervision, curriculum, and instruction from Texas A&M University Commerce. I believe we have some people on the phone also from that institution, but before we go to them, I think we'll need a motion just to open up the discussion. What I'd like to also get is a short report from the folks who do that.
Matt served as the interim chair this last time.
It's my understanding you'll need a motion to open discussion. Is that right?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm proposing. And then we'd like to get a short report from.
Okay. Hey, could we mute? If you're calling in, would you please mute? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just get a short report from our internal committee that reviews these proposals, and then we'll open the discussion to the folks at Texas A&M Commerce for their short report as well.
Okay, with the great and fine assistance of Gabe Gay, our committee acted on this preliminary about a week ago. I don't have the exact date. And that group consists of myself, Marshall, Paula, and Randy. Bhagya is still chair of the committee, but in her absence through the end of summer, I'm it. Consequently, you want us to discuss it right now? We felt approval was appropriate, so.
Yeah, just a short report, just a very quick review of what your recommendation is and why the recommendation is what it is.
There was a bit of feedback I think we provided A&M Commerce, and Gay, you might help me out because I haven't seen that come back to us articulated. I know there was a question, Marshall, with some budget issues and some minor editorials.
I provided a summary of the minor questions that you all had to both institutions.
Okay, thank you. But long and short is that we approved moving forward with the proposal to this group.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you. At this point, I'd like to open the discussion to the folks who are on the phone conference. If we could open up to them. I understand we have 3 people there, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Can we? I think we have Dr. Sandy Weeks, who's the interim provost, Dr. Martha Foote, who is Department Head Curriculum and Instruction, and also we have Dr. Susan, and I hope I'm pronouncing her last name, Sabo, thank you, who's the doctoral coordinator as well. So, folks, please go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then please give us a short report on your proposal.
What your recommendation is and what my report on your proposal.
And again, please.
Okay.
Guys, if I could get you to turn down the computer, because there's about a 3-second delay in case any of us says anything that needs to be bleeped out between when we say something and then when it gets webcast. So if you could just sort of turn down your computer and just rely upon the conference call for this piece, that would be great.
Right. Just keep your phone active and turn down the volume from your computer monitor.
Okay, I think we've done that now.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. You do have the people that are here at this site correctly. I'm Martha Foote, and I'm head of the Department of Curriculum and Instruction, and that's the department that this doctorate is offered from. Also here today is Associate Provost for Curriculum, Dr. Sandy Weeks, in Academic Affairs, and also the coordinator of the doctoral program, Dr. Susan Szabo. And she, just for your information, has just taken over that role from Dr. Wayne Lennox, who retired this May. And our proposal, we have a doctoral program that's been offered here for over 20 years, I believe, and it is fairly robust. We have about 60 to 70 students most of the time. And we are, as you know, Commerce is about 60 miles northeast of the Dallas Metroplex area. Our situation is that most of our existing students, probably about 90%, actually live in that Metroplex area. And so they need to drive here, right now have to drive here, most of them after teaching or working in the public schools each day, and try to get here by 4:30 or 5 and for doctoral classes. And so we also have a Metroplex facility in Mesquite, Texas, which is a suburb on the east side of the Metroplex. And that is a facility that is approved by SACS. It has classroom, offices, library, clerical staff. So it's an off-site facility. And so we are proposing to be able to offer the courses in this doctoral program at that site. And also, there is a site, Rockwall Independent School District, has a facility that is that's called their Administrative and Professional Development Facility. It actually used to be a middle school. And it has also been approved by SACS. We offer master's programs. Collin College offers some programs there. And we also have some undergraduate field-based classes at that site. And so both of the sites where we are proposing to offer these courses are approved by SACS, and we have other courses, master's programs and things being offered there. So basically, this is going to be the same professors who would teach there rather than here. So in a nutshell, that's what we're proposing to do. I believe the bullet items that you mentioned, clarification, would you like for me to address those?
Matt or Gay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. You mentioned a clarification regarding the program cost at each site. It was not clear if the institution is providing the base operating funds for each site, and that is why the budget appeared underfunded for the off-campus program. We do already have the operating funds for those sites funded. That's already a part of what's happening. And what we think is going to happen from this proposal is that we will be able to increase our enrollment some because of our access to students. And we will keep, another question was, will the on-campus program be continued? We will do that. We're going to set up a rotating basis for the courses to be offered either on campus or at these off-campus sites. We anticipate that over time it could be that there's many more courses offered at the off-campus than on, because that's really where right now our students are. But I think I've actually mentioned the different items that you had listed in the bullet.
Yeah, this is Matt Baker from Texas Tech again, who worked with the group that reviewed it. I guess the question is, it's a fundamental question, I think, of all of us, not just for this particular case that we're looking at, is the operation of an off-campus site, shouldn't that be attributed at the program level for every program offered and recalculated per program? And that's just a fundamental question, because there are some costs to operating, and obviously as you grow those sites, there'll be more costs. So
sure.
Just a comment.
And that very well could be, and if that were the case, we would need to include that. Sandy, do you have thoughts on that?
At the Metroplex, we have a fully staffed, fully operational site there already with computer lab that's large enough for any of these classes. There's secretarial support there. There's someone who actually handles scheduling the classes. Now, Rockwall I'm not as familiar with because I have taught in the theater.
This is a first for the LTAC, I think.
I don't have a dog.
There's a joke in here somewhere, but I haven't come up with it yet. I think.
If I could try, this is Marshall Schott from University of Houston. Sorry we caught you on Bring Your Dog to Work Day.
I knew it was coming.
I think the question that Matt raised is sort of fundamental in terms of the way that we build budgets. I mean, we understand that you've got an operational facility in Mesquite. I think that in terms of budget planning, it's really critical that you attribute your overhead costs at the program level. I think that's really what we're getting at, is that a certain portion of those individuals' time who support that program in Mesquite, and even some of the facilities costs, be defrayed at the program level. Again, I think it's just a philosophical approach in terms of the way that you build budgets for programs.
I see what you're saying. Right. I guess all I can tell you at this point is that for us to make this switch at this point in time, we're not anticipating costs increasing in terms of what you're talking about, other than how they would increase from growth.
Does that address your question, Matt and Marshall?
Faculty is there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's where you're. I think that's where. Yeah, that's understood where you're heading to. Matt, any more questions?
No more questions to me of any of the other subcommittees members. Any questions, or committee members as a whole, council members? Okay.
I do. I have one or two questions after I looked over the proposal, and these are a little bit more specific. But I had some questions on the proposal on page. I don't see a page number. Oh yeah, 14. Sorry, page 14 of the proposal. Right at the bottom, it talks about what training and delivering instruction via distance ed that faculty members currently have. Can you all hear me out there?
You repeat that?
Guys, can we get you to mute, please? If you're not speaking.
We have muted that. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, did you hear the first part of what I was saying?
No, I did not. I'm sorry.
Okay, let me repeat it. On page 14 of your proposal, you talk about faculty training. And more specifically, you say all faculty members have been trained or are currently using your LMS, which is eCollege.
Yes.
That is technical training. My question is, what types of pedagogical training do you have for your faculty who are going to be teaching online? Because obviously it's a different animal to convert the content to an online teaching environment and be able to teach it effectively that way.
We have become involved, we're just becoming involved, I guess I should say, as an institute for quality education. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Just hold on for just a moment. Just go ahead and mute what you got and see if it clears.
It may be the other institution calling in.
We'll
Whenever you're ready, go ahead. I think we'll give it one more try.
We have our power off on the computer, so we've got the volume off. We are looking into just that issue because that is very important to us as well. Our faculty go to conferences. They have tried to think about, that you don't just take the course you've got and try to put it in that same format, and the way we need to do this to make it interactive and effective online instruction. We have started working with the Sloan Institute, which is an institute. If you're familiar with it, its purpose is quality online education.
Right, you're talking about the 5 pillars that's from the Sloan Consortium?
Yes, right, that kind of thing. And so I might even let Dr. Szabo address this a little bit because I know she has been designing some various approaches within the online format. Would you like to talk about that, Dr. Szabo? Yeah, it's not online. It's just a web enhanced, but yeah.
It's a distance ed. These are still face-to-face courses, as far as I'm understanding, and it's all taught by full-time faculty that have received their PhD or EDD. That's the only ones who could teach in a doctoral program. We're asking for approval in Mesquite or Rockwall, so the students can physically go there. We physically will go there, but this is still basically a face-to-face, even though some of the coursework will be web enhanced. This is not asking for distance education.
No, but we do have 2 online courses that are in this mix and in the current mix, right?
Yes.
Right, and that's more specifically what I was asking about, is in terms of pedagogical training. I read the proposal, and I know that all the professors who are going to be teaching the courses have doctoral degrees.
Okay.
My question was more aimed towards not technical training on the learning management system, but pedagogical training as to how to teach online, particularly considering that you're going to have 2 fully online courses.
Right.
Now,
and I guess in part, our e-college department actually works with the pedagogical aspect of it as well. So I didn't make that clear. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I understand that some of your faculty are going to conferences and that sort of thing. I would strongly urge you to have a component, if you don't have it already, of having a component within the university that provides that kind of training to faculty who are specifically teaching online. It's a very valuable component to have.
We have an instructional technology unit that provides faculty with design services and then also with the pedagogical.
Okay. The other thing, and I don't want to get into too much detail with this either, has to do with assessment. And you're talking on page, you mentioned on page 22, on the top of page 22, that the institution monitors and improves the quality of the doctoral program through learner outcome assessments.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that you do those regularly each year?
Yes, we do.
And do you assess especially since you're going to offer 2 fully online courses again, if you separately assess that student population, because that is a requirement from SACS, make sure that you do that.
Right, okay, thank you.
I mean, differently from the rest of the cohort who is taking the courses in a face-to-face environment.
There is an online that's different.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
The online students have a separate assessment tool that they use in addition to the traditional learning.
Okay, very good. And those are the only 2 questions I had. Anybody else have any questions from the group? No? Okay. Do we at this point...
Let's go ahead and call for a vote.
Okay. Do I have a motion to call for... I want to call for a vote of this proposal from Texas A&M Commerce. Do we have a motion?
No, we don't anymore.
Randy? Okay. Do we have a second, please? Okay. All in favor of approving the proposal from Texas A&M University Commerce, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? No. Obviously, the motion carries. Congratulations, folks, out there in Commerce.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your assistance and your work.
And thank you for participating today. We appreciate it.
Okay. You're welcome.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We're going to move on now to the other one, which is the Texas A&M University Kingsville Doctor of Education in Bilingual Education. Do we have those folks online also?
Yes, we're here. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
All right. Good morning, everyone. We're from Texas A&M Kingsville, representing the Department of Teacher and Bilingual Education. I am Dr. Jaya Goswami. I'm the Associate Dean of the College of Education and Human Performance. I'm also a faculty member in the Department of Teacher and Bilingual Education. I have here with me to answer your questions or clarify some issues Dr. Patricia Gomez, who is the Doctoral Program Coordinator, Dr. Roberto Torres, Associate Professor in the department. From remote locations, we have Doctors Norma Guzman and Valentin Ekiaka, who are faculty members in the department. And from the curriculum and instruction component, we have Dr. Monica Ratcliffe, Dr. Sue Bradley, and Dr. Jack Bradley. So we're well armed here for whatever questions you may have. As you may have read in the proposal, this proposal is in response to a strong demand in our area, in the South Texas area, for a doctoral program to be delivered online. This is, currently we have a combination of face-to-face, hybrid, as well as online courses. And we've been doing this for several years. Of course, it started 37 years ago as the first doctoral program in bilingual education in the entire country. We are in our 37th year now with a pretty healthy enrollment and faculty resources. But of late, our current students have been asking for classes to be offered in a hybrid and online format. We have spoken with entities in the Rio Grande Valley where several of our students come from. They work in school districts there, and their supervisors, who are senior administrators in their school districts, have strongly recommended that we offer courses online to reduce the personal impact on their employees, who are our students, in terms of travel and cost and childcare and time and so on. Currently, our program has about 48 to 50 students enrolled, and due to a large grant that Drs. Gomez and Torres have, they are able to recruit a healthy number every academic year. So we expect the enrollment to be steady and growing. And our faculty, there are 5 faculty members in the bilingual program, and about 5 to 7 in the related areas in curriculum and instruction to teach courses and guide doctoral dissertations. Almost all of them currently are trained in distance learning through Quality Matters. Many of them are peer reviewers in Quality Matters. They have been through the virtual instructor certification program offered by Texas A&M College Station. And our own iTech department here, the Distance Learning and Instructional Technology Department, offers hands-on training, one-on-one, as well as workshops on Blackboard 9.1, which is a platform that we use, as well as other technologies for instruction. The program, which is currently in place, is a 63-hour program, and we intend for the program to remain as is, with no change in the content except for the format, the delivery format, which will be through hybrid and online courses. However, we do expect there to be a few face-to-face requirements. For example, as required in the hybrid courses based on what the professor states, we expect students in this program to be face-to-face for comprehensive exams, for defense of their proposals, and for the defense of their dissertations, as well as an orientation that would help them navigate through the program as well as the particular course. In that case, they might be able to be here on campus, and if that's not possible, then we would like them to join us virtually for that orientation session. So as far as the question about the face-to-face requirements of the program, we expect those to be the areas in which they would be required to be here face-to-face. Other than that, we expect the program to remain exactly the same as it is described in the proposal, with the same number of hours, the same courses, the same admission requirements, etc., except for the delivery format, as I said. We would be happy to answer any of your questions. I have, as I said, our team here to clarify any issues that you might want clarified.
Thank you very much. This is Matt Baker at Texas Tech. I chaired a subcommittee that looked at this initially, and first of all, let me say that we thought overall the proposal was well written, so we compliment you and the team on that. Secondly, there was this question of how much beyond 50% was going to be offered online versus face-to-face. What I heard you say is that all of the courses and coursework would be online, and that the on-campus expectations would be for orientation, would be for comprehensive written exams, and for defenses, whether they're of the exam or of the dissertation. Is that correct?
That is correct, but in addition to that, we also expect to offer hybrid courses, in which case students would be on campus or streamed in virtually for the face-to-face component of those hybrid courses.
But not required to be on campus during those hybrid courses if it's being streamed. Is that correct? And what I'm getting at is the truth in advertising. Typically, we like to communicate very clearly with the students that X% is the expectation for on campus versus off campus, and we didn't see that articulated very clearly in the proposal.
Okay, this is Dr. Gomez on the doctoral program.
Yes?
Can you still hear us? Okay, I think we're going to have to reestablish the phone conference. We just take a minute to do that. Why don't we just wait for a moment for the technicians back there to try to reestablish it? Matt, did you also have some additional questions that you sent to them? Or
I think, if I remember correctly, this was a primary question in terms of exactly what was the expectation for on-campus participation.
Okay. So when we get back online with them, just go ahead and restate that, and we'll address that. And that was the only question you all had?
That's correct.
Okay.
And Matt?
Yes.
Do you have the proposal handy?
I do not. I have it in my head, though, because I've read it twice.
Should be one right in front of you there.
On page 15 at the bottom, that's where they list 100% online hybrid via video conferencing, other appropriate formats, and then they say depending on faculty preferences.
Right. There was some ambiguity of what was online, what was IVC, what was not, and that's what we were trying to establish with them.
Right.
I'm sorry, we lost connection. We're back again online.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to turn it back over to Matt Baker, and he's going to finish his comment or question.
Just my question is if you could clarify specifically what's expected of the off-campus learner in terms of coming on campus per the coursework.
The expectation of the off-campus learner is to meet the content course by participating with the guidelines of the state, which require 51% of the time to be on campus face-to-face to meet content of the courses. This can be done as a synchronous or asynchronous format. Like we said initially, that the students will be required to be on campus face-to-face to prepare their proposals, their dissertation defenses, and also to comply with presenting their comprehensive exams.
Okay, and just philosophically, I'd just like to state publicly, I have a big problem with that in terms of is it a hybrid program or is it an online program? And I'm still very unclear on that.
Well, we'd like to see both the hybrid and online program for the doctoral program altogether. Okay. One of the committee members here in Austin might help me out with some clarification questions because I'm still confused.
This is Mark Workman, Blinn College. I noticed in the summary of your request, at least, you talk about you're wanting to move more than 50% of the program content so it's delivered via online. But I guess the confusing part is under delivery modes, you list most all formats, 100% online, hybrid, video conferencing, and then say it will depend on faculty preferences. I guess the concern is if a student signs up for the program, will they know from day one what their requirement's going to be for traveling to your campus for face-to-face sessions?
For the hybrid courses, they can be stream in or be face-to-face here on campus.
Mark, is your question more oriented towards, oriented may not be, do you want the students, I think what you're asking is, do you want the students to, will this program notify the students up front as to exactly what their level of commitment will be, and what the delivery mechanisms
we will have
be.
that outlined up front.
So all students will go in knowing exactly what's going to be required of them in terms of delivery formats. Is that right, Mark?
Right. So, if I'm a student in Afghanistan or China, do I know right up front I'm going to have to fly into a face-to-face session X number of times? Or
Yes, they will be given that information up front of to what dates they will be expected to make a face-to-face appearance.
Usually when courses are scheduled, it has a prefix attached to it, a number attached to it, which indicates whether it's hybrid, face-to-face, or completely online. At the same time, when the course is scheduled and announced, faculty usually post whether they have a meeting or two that are required for the students to attend, and when the meeting is scheduled. So yes, students will be notified in advance about the type of course and the expectations that the faculty has scheduled for them, depending on the type of course.
Randy?
We have that online already in some courses.
This is Randy McDonald from SFA. I think our concern is we would like to see that on a programmatic level. If you're talking about an online program, I would want, if I'm in Afghanistan, I want to know before I sign up for the program, not wait until each course is offered individually to find out that requirement. Can you tell us today what the total on-campus requirements are going to be for the program?
That will depend on the professor assigned to teach the course.
I think as a committee we have a fundamental problem with that. You can't admit students without it's a truth in advertising kind of issue prior to the admission of the program, so students will know if they're in Dalhart, America, Dalhart, Texas, up in the northern panhandle, how many times they might have to travel down to Kingsville, which is a significant difference. It may be closer to Afghanistan, I don't know.
And I understand, this is Steve Levy, I understand that there will be times when a course may be converted, let's say, from a hybrid to a distance fully online course or that sort of thing. And there may be times for exceptions to that. But I'm in agreement with the other folks who are commenting here from the meeting in that on a programmatic level, like Randy indicated, those students should have a pretty clear understanding up front of as to what their residency requirement is going to be and what the delivery formats are going to be as well.
Okay.
Just to follow up, in my personal opinion, it's okay to become more lenient if you've advertised it as an online program with 3 campus visits and somewhere in there you decide there's only 2. That's fine. But to leave it open to possibly requiring additional campus visits than are originally advertised for the entire program is problematic.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that comment.
May I jump in?
Sure.
Okay, this is Dr. Ikiaka from the Teacher and Bilingual Education. To answer the question, for example, if the student is in Afghanistan and want to enroll to the program, and there is another way we use for those students to attend the face-to-face campus. It doesn't mean that the student has to fly from Afghanistan to come to campus. When the group meeting on campus, the student may be attending virtually via web-based video conferencing from Afghanistan, from a remote distance. So this is the one way we do how the student who was far away can attend those kind of face-to-face meeting required by the instructor. Also, when the students enroll to the program, the first question when they apply to the program, the first question they're gonna get from the system is, are you going to be a face-to-face or a distant learner? So if they specify that they're going to be a distant learner, from then we assume that we're going to have students from abroad who are going to attend our courses from a distant, remote locations. so that the program coordinator know and ahead of advance what they can do, what they can plan. But it doesn't mean that if you are in Afghanistan, you have to try just to come on campus for those 2 or 3 face-to-face meetings. There is another way using technology that they can attend, participate in the face-to-face meeting on campus.
If I may, I'd like to add something to what Dr. Equiaca just said. We do have the infrastructure necessary to capture face-to-face sessions for students who are here so that students in Afghanistan or in other remote locations can access the information. We have lecture capture and show and share capacity that's funded by the grant that Dr. Goswami alluded to. That way we can offer these opportunities, the academic requirements set by faculty on site for students who are elsewhere, even here in the state or somewhere else in the United States. So I agree with Dr. Equiaca. There are ways to circumvent this and then facilitate the process for remote students.
Therefore, we'll be able to meet the needs of the students to continue with a hybrid course and still being able to participate in the face-to-face through video conferencing.
Matt, does that help answer it for you or for Randy?
I think Paula would like to say a few words.
I still have concerns about the transparency of the information to the student. Most students make their decisions based on how many times they have to come to campus. And your geographic, the area that you will attract students from is very influenced by the number of times they must travel and their own financial situation or their own family commitments. So I think it's very, very important to the student for you to really define exactly what types of travel and presence on campus commitments that they have, or whether they can opt out of them or not. But I think it's very important for it to be upfront when they are making their decision what program to enter.
And what I would suggest, and I'm running this by staff, is that we move to go forward with the proposal pending some kind of verification from the Office of the Provost at the institution that is very clear in terms of the expectation of the student. Is that, Van, I'm asking you, is that a fair way to proceed? Okay, good.
And we have done that kind of thing before in this committee.
Yeah, because what I'm hearing
Not necessarily
now...
with that specific question, but I mean done that kind of thing with a provision. Okay. Go ahead, Matt.
Excuse me, sir. Would you need a specific number or a percentage of courses that are going to be offered as hybrid, or a statement, like an umbrella statement saying that hybrid courses might require face-to-face or virtual presence in the classroom? So what I'm asking is, would a blanket statement be sufficient, or do you want that statement specified for every single course that we offer in the program?
I think you need to work specifically with staff on answering that question, and that can be worked out in terms of the detail, because internally those of us that have been on this committee for a long time are communicating with one another either verbally or non-verbally in terms of the concerns and the staff. But a troubling thing is to say it depends on the faculty, and that's kind of what I'm hearing in the proposal, and that's just not acceptable.
Randy?
I think it would be simplified just to answer the question. I am a remote, answer it for me if you can. I am a remote student. I want to complete your program. How many times do I have to come to your campus?
I think that will vary, but like we said before, if we're using our technology to capture the on-site presentations, whether it's at the beginning of a course or at the middle of a course, travel to campus can be reduced. to a minimum, or eliminate it completely unless there are some certain requirements set by a faculty member. For dissertation, for instance, personally, I find it a little bit difficult to do everything online because there's a lot of interaction that needs to take place that technology cannot facilitate.
Okay, sir. Sir?
I think to answer your question, sir, my answer would be you would be required to appear on campus for your comprehensive exams, for your proposal and dissertation defenses. As far as coursework is concerned, for hybrid courses, that would be established by the professor up front, for which you may appear face-to-face, flesh and blood, or stream in virtually.
Right.
Okay, based on that response, my personal opinion is I would not sign up for your program. That information is too variable.
How could we be more specific in order to recruit you?
Give me a number. How many?
A number for the number of courses or the number of meetings per course? Because that changes with every time the course is offered. The number of meetings per course would change, but were you looking for the number of courses that might require you to be on campus?
Randy, may I jump in? Perhaps we should just table this, and I think staff needs to spend some more time with the institution and institutional reps, and if need be, we could have a conference call follow-up.
I think we have one or two more comments from folks here too before we decide to do that. Paula? Okay.
I'd just like
Brett?
to make a comment as we're tabling it, because they, in their proposal, they actually reference, the college where I'm at as potential recruiting, and being a Kingsville graduate myself from their doctoral program, but in ed leadership, I share those same concerns, and I know that the cohort before me in the ed leadership had an experience that way where it was very variable. They were told that it was going to be distance ed, and then once the cohort was accepted, the variability caused quite a bit of a retention problem, and that's a concern that I hold, and I know that they held it very dearly the year after, which was the cohort I went in, and the expectations were very clearly laid out, saying you will have to drive to our campus at least once a week for the rest of the next 3 or 4 years. And so when I went in, I knew very clearly I was going to have to be on campus, and I still chose to do it. And so I think that's where Randy is going with it, that if it's too variable, you just don't know what you're getting into.
Are there any other comments from the group here in Austin before we, again, I'll give you folks in Kingsville just a chance to comment in just a minute. Are there any other comments from folks here in Austin? Okay, go ahead, folks. Go ahead, Kingsville.
Who should we get in touch with to clarify these issues?
The recommendation that I think, and I'm looking around at everybody, so I'm looking for some affirmation of this, is to table the issue for now, and I think this group can come up with a fairly specific question or issue that we can state pretty clearly, pretty succinctly, get it to you right away so that you can respond to it and you can move forward with it quickly. We don't want to delay the process at all, and we just would need to formulate, I think, would be the appropriate thing, and I'm looking at our staff right now, but the appropriate thing would probably be to formulate a question and official response from this group, get it to them ASAP, as soon as possible, give them the opportunity to respond, and then this group, by the way, does meet remotely also. We can get together and vote on this issue via a phone conference, so it won't take us long once you give us a response to be able to get back to you. Again, one of our areas of emphasis is that we do not want to delay you very much, but we do need to get resolution and a response to this. And am I seeing that that's the best way to go from everybody around? I'm getting a good nod of heads at this point. So I think that's what we're going to do. I think we're going to table the issue. Matt, did you have a comment? Okay, we're going to go ahead and table the issue for now. And we will get back to you very, very quickly with a prepared question, with a prepared comment, so that you can really get back to us again very quickly and respond to it in a very definitive way.
Steve, we need a motion to table.
Okay, and thank you. And I need a motion from someone here in Austin to go ahead and table the issue. Matt?
Yeah, I move that we table the proposal to offer the degree from Texas A&M Kingsville online.
Okay, and do we have a second? And all in favor? Okay, any opposed? No. Okay, we're going to table the issue. We will get back to you, though, but thank you, folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Okay, let me ask Van a question. We have a pretty aggressive set of issues and agenda items, or agenda item really, coming up this afternoon. I think one of the things Van was trying to do was talk to staff, see if we can get an early lunch going.
Lunch will be here momentarily.
Okay, lunch will be here momentarily. It's almost 11:30 right now. What we're going to do is have lunch first. I think we're going to adjourn for break for lunch at first now, and we're going to spend all afternoon working on the LTAC distance education report. So, do we need a motion to adjourn at least at this point? I guess we do.
No, we don't.
No? Okay. All right. Thank you. So we're just gonna break for a few minutes. We're gonna have lunch, and we'll reconvene as soon as possible. Thank you, everybody. Okay, let's get started again. Let me just think for just a second. First thing. I think not only myself, but I think the entire committee wants to thank Kingston for his service. Kingston is going to be stepping off the LTAC at the end of this meeting. Is that correct? Yes. And we just wanted to express our thanks for your service and let you know how much we appreciate it.
I just want to thank you as well. I was just saying to some people over lunch, this is the most congenial group that I have ever worked with. A lot of work gets done in a very short time, but the level of commitment is just amazing, and an easy group of people to work with. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. We can change that congeniality. No, we can't.
And you might mention too that Sune.
Yes. In fact, Sune
is now at
UT San Antonio, and as a result of moving to UT San Antonio,
is off
the committee. At least, is that temporary, or is that?
We'll have to see if they nominate him.
Okay, so it's going to take a nomination from UTSA to get Sune back on the committee, but so he's left us hopefully temporarily. So we hope to see him back again. But Kingston, thank you. Thank you for all your help. Appreciate it. Appreciate it very much. This next part of the meeting is something that Van and Gay and I spoke about a lot. We're going to make a little bit of an alteration from what some of you thought was going to be the direction of the group. The direction was originally going to center on the House and Senate interim charges, which related to distance education, but the work that was done by the individual work groups, and we're going to talk about that a lot, does not go in vain in terms of separating out and really emphasizing the issues of the Senate charges. I want to turn it over to Van for just a minute. He will tell you pretty much about why we're changing direction and the direction we're going to take, and then I'll fill out some information about the steps we're going to take, how we're going to go about doing it, and what the timeline is. And that really specifically is working now as a group over the next several meetings to complete the LTAC distance education report. So let me just turn it over to Van for just a minute, talk to you a little bit about the Senate and House charges and why we're going in the direction that we are.
When we had you begin, when you all began in your subgroups looking at what the most significant issues are facing distance ed in Texas, we used the Senate higher education charge, interim charge, and the House higher ed interim charges as a jumping off point. As I mentioned earlier this morning, the Senate actually is going to be conducting its hearing on distance education Wednesday. So what is really useful for us at this point, and they moved a little faster than I think we thought they were going to, but what's really useful for us at this point is to take the information that y'all have worked with in your subgroups and craft that into a larger report that really will focus on what are the most significant challenges facing Texas in terms of distance education, and then some very specific recommendations. What oftentimes happens during session for us is that we're asked to respond to pieces of legislation. And really what we're oftentimes in the need of are some very specific recommendations. It's not enough for us just to be able to say, well, this is a big issue. We have to provide some very specific suggestions of how to go about dealing with that. And so that's really the void that your report is going to be positioned to step into as we move into the next session, where we know that distance education is going to be an issue that we hear more and more of. Then your report will allow us to be able to, as an agency, inside the agency, as we're doing bill analysis and as we're talking to constituent groups, it will allow us to be able to say, this is what our Learning Technology Advisory Committee has indicated are the most significant issues facing distance education in Texas. Here's why they're important issues, and here's what their specific recommendations are for handling these challenges. And I can't emphasize enough that really what we're looking for here is not just a good discussion of the problem, but we want your specific recommendations for solutions, and want it grounded in research, because that's the language that is going to hold the most cachet, is that research language. So that's really what we're looking at doing now, and especially as I think we see the LBB's report, as we see the comptroller's report comes out, there's going to be a lot of discussion about distance ed and cost effectiveness, and this is going to be this committee's opportunity to help frame that debate rather than merely having to respond to that.
And as we move forward through the discussion this afternoon, like Van said, our recommendations and what's going to be included in this document when it gets completed are just simply not just simply what we think are the key issues, but what are the key issues that are documented by research, by how other colleges and universities, or some of the ones that we represent here, have represented them by best practices that we published. What are the key issues that percolate to the top that we know are going to be clearly supported by research and clearly supported by documentation, and not just our opinion as to what we think those issues might or might not be. So let me also make a couple of other points here too, and I made some notes because I didn't want to forget a few things, and we're going to try to keep the group on track in various ways, and I'm trying to give you a perspective as to where we're headed with this discussion. What you have in front of you here, and it may be in a black and white version, I think, from the handouts today, is something that you all have gotten, I think, via email in the last week or so. And it's headed, I think it's 1.3 Draft Outline LTAC Distance Education Report 2012. This is a document that's pretty much largely made of what the work groups have reported. Okay, and you'll see in a number of different places, you'll see that a participation group or the affordability group or the student services group or the excellence group, whatever they may be, have all been cited here as to where that comment came from. Now, this is a document that Van and Gay put together about a week or so ago, maybe a little bit longer than a week or so ago, but it's really a collection of all the hard work that you folks have done. This is the root document from which we will be working today. It's a draft of the issues, again, based on the reports from each one of your work groups. And before I go any further, one of the things that I really wanted to do also is thank each one of the work groups. You all have done tremendous work. And even when, and I know several of you as individuals, as we kind of select that as individual leaders of some of the groups, got an email from me asking you to organize your reports in reference to the Senate interim charge. I want to thank those individuals who did that. I don't want to forget, Amy was one of them, I believe. I have them written down here. Matt Baker, Sune, who's not here unfortunately today, and Mark. thank you very much, all of you, for putting those reports together, and even more importantly, getting them to us in a timely way. Because that was very, very good. It allowed us to be able to put this, or actually them, to be able to put this document together. I started working on this, by the way, last week on my own, and then about 2 hours after I started working on it in my office, this document came in an email to me, and I called them later that day. We had a little phone conference, and I said, thank you, because you really organized what I was trying to do in preparation for our phone conference that day. They did a great job of putting it together. So the steps are that we're going to start working with this draft of the issues. We're going to prioritize, like Van said, 5 or 6 major issues and sub-issues. That is the work for today. What are the 5 or 6 key issues that we feel are the ones that are most important? And then after we feel they're most important, then again, we're going to go ahead and start doing that research. I know an email also went out last week asking you to identify what those are, what those key issues are, and what those sub-issues are. And if you did not email Gay with those, I hope you still have those recommendations that you brought with you today so that we can discuss them. We can get them up onto the screen because we know somebody working on the word processor. I guess Van's going to do it from here. And he is going to enter those onto the word processing document over there, and we'll all be able to see everything as we move along. So that's really, really important. And we're also going to identify those sub-issues at the same time. This should help us map out a outline for what we're trying to accomplish and a specific direction for what we're trying to accomplish as well. It's very, very important that we stay focused on distance education and hybrid courses. It's very easy for us to get sidetracked on issues that are related to this, but what our report needs to center on is distance education and hybrid courses, and those are the areas that we need to stay on. If we get sidetracked, one or more of us will try to get us back on track again. So please forgive us if we say, wait a minute, that's a little bit too peripheral. Let's get back to what we're trying to talk about here in this group. Once prioritized, like I mentioned before, we're going to begin researching and drafting text for each issue and each sub-issue. And we have talked just very briefly this morning as to how we're going to go about doing that. We may need to again assign those 5 or 6 issues to individuals and groups, and perhaps appoint a leader of that group to start working on that. That's one scenario as to how we thought we might do that, but we can discuss that as we go along. We also need to identify which areas still lack information as we go along, which ones need a little bit more substantiation, if you will. Again, look at where they map out, and then we should be able to get a final outline from there. Again, this will serve as the basis for the LTAC report. Let's see. I'm just looking through my notes very, very quickly of anything that I have not mentioned. Schedule. The last thing I want to talk about is in terms of a schedule. Today, we're going to map out those issues. We're going to identify those 4 or 5 and the sub-issues again. Between today and September, we're probably going to break out into smaller groups to address each one of those individual issues and, again, develop substantiations and qualifications as to why they are or why they should be included in the report. By the September LTAC meeting, the research and the organization should be done by that point. So we should have a pretty good idea of what the outline of our report is going to be. And we'll probably spend a lot of time, again, in the September meeting doing just that, and fleshing that out and finalizing all of that stuff. So between September then and the November meetings, we can make revisions based on our discussion in September. And then by the November LTAC meeting, we think we're going to be able to finalize the document. Does that seem like the fair schedule? Is that what we talked about?
Yeah.
Okay. That's essentially, is everybody okay with that? Is everybody, all right. How would we like to proceed? I'm just going to try to throw this out.
I think actually what we can do, if we can just go around the circle, all of you should have come with 4 or 5 of what you chose as the 4 or 5 major points out of the document. And if we could just go ahead and go around and get those up on the screen, I think we'll begin to pretty quickly see where issues are grouping and see what sort of rises to the top.
Where shall we? Actually, I can kick it off if you want, or we can start somewhere around the room. Okay. I sent an email to Gay a couple days ago, so this is real easy for me. I can just read this from the list. The first one I saw, and really I'm basically pulling information from this document, again, that you all have in front of you, is the state and institutional policy changes. I think those are those policy changes, and those really do need to be addressed from, and I had 5 areas or 5 sub-issues that fell under that major category. The first one was, and again, if you might even want to open up the 2 documents and just copy and paste, because it might even make it easier. But the first one was request of the coordinating board work with institutions to determine what data sets are being collected, then determine what data sets can be collected that would inform the correlation of student demographics and learning outcomes in online courses. It actually says student demography and learning outcomes in online courses. That is one that was presented by the participation work group, by the way. So request the coordinating board work with institutions to determine what data sets are being collected and determine which ones can be collected that would inform the correlation of student demography and learning outcomes in online courses. Want me to go to the second one, Van? Or, okay. Okay. Second one is redesign the statewide reporting system for formula to accommodate rolling enrollment courses. And that was suggested by the affordability group. Again, redesign the statewide reporting system for formula to accommodate rolling enrollment courses. And I'm assuming by that we mean flex entry? Is that, I mean, that's my assumption when I put that in there, because I feel the growth of flex entry courses and the proliferation of that are really important. The third one, distance learning student retention and persistence data for developmental education courses, reading, writing, and math, in other words, on a statewide level. I think part of what my area of emphasis for that is that if we have consistent data on retention and persistence coming from the various institutions who are involved in that, we're going to be able to tackle the developmental issue a whole lot more readily than if we have different kinds of data coming from different institutions. And obviously we want to look at learning outcomes as well as retention and student success. It all kind of falls into the overall umbrella of student success, but retention and persistence and learning outcomes are the 3 key issues to me. The fourth one, Van, is coordinating board facilitates, I think is what it's meant to say. Coordinating board facilitates collaboration among institutions and assists in obtaining discounts on enterprise-level instructional technology used to facilitate distance learning. The Virtual College of Texas, Ron, has done a good job with that, with several pieces of software. Ron, I like the way the model has gone with the 2 or 3 different things that you guys are working with. I think that's an excellent model to start with, and I think that's something we can do on a larger scale statewide to bring the economies of scale to play and bring down the cost of technology. You have a comment?
Yeah. Truthfully, when you talk to a vendor,
Your mic.
When you talk to a vendor, if the first words out of your mouth when they say, who are you representing, how many colleges, you say the whole state of Texas, you go into an entire different universe of negotiation instantly.
And that's one of the other reasons why I wanted to bring that to the forefront of this group, because we're a relatively powerful lobby when we go to a software company and say this is what we want to do as an entire state. And I think we have economies of scale that we can take advantage of there. The last one I had is expedite developmental education progress. You can see where I'm going with some of these themes. And completion by the use of modularization. In other words, allowing students to study what is specifically needed. Let me give about a 30-second background explanation of that. The way that we, in most community colleges in Texas, in fact, most community colleges or most colleges in the country are offering developmental education is, and I'll just use math as an example, students will have to take a developmental sequence of mathematics course in order to be able to be eligible, obviously, to take the college level course. In most cases, that's Mathematics 13-14 college algebra. Our students, and I'm just giving you this from an HCC example, which I think is consistent with most others, that the students start with, well, first of all, they take an assessment exam, most notably, most commonly, the Compass exam. And as a result of the Compass exam, they'll be placed in one of the levels of developmental education. The lowest level is 0306, then 0308, and then 0312, and then finally, when they finish that, then they're finally eligible to get into college-level algebra to actually earn credit. That sequence takes too long, especially when you consider the fact that you're taking 0306 for a 16-week semester, then you're taking 0308 for a 16-week semester, then you're taking 0312 for a 16-week semester, which finally, this poor student is then eligible to take college algebra and actually earn credit, when all this time they've been spending tuition money and getting financial aid also to be able to build up to that level. Well, the current trend is to go back to the Compass assessment or whatever the assessment tool that is used, identify those areas that they have strengths and weaknesses in, and center specifically on those weaknesses in a computer-assisted instructional format. Now, there's been a lot of different things discussed about this. Virginia Tech and Northern Virginia Community College are using the Emporium model, as are many other colleges, a number of other very prominent community colleges and universities around the country. And they're centering specifically on the areas through a computer lab setting where there are faculty stationed in those labs, and they will serve as mentors or tutors or faculty and work specifically on those areas that the student is deficient in. Once that student shows proficiency, then they move on. So it accelerates their progress towards completion of the developmental sequence and gets them into the college level a lot more quickly. And as we all know, time is the enemy. As the Complete College America publication says, the longer it takes a student to complete their college education, the less chance they actually have of completing it. So that's what's behind all that. I don't want to belabor it too much. Second item. Do you want me to go into the second item and list those sub-issues, Van, or should we just? Okay. Second one I had is educational resources and materials. The first one was textbooks, which came from the Excellence and Affordability Group, and I'll read from my notes here. Consider developing or using existing standardized open source texts on a statewide level for some of our most highly enrolled courses, and core curriculum with a question mark is in parentheses after that. Consider putting together a select group of faculty from across the state to develop each of these. Also require that these texts are peer-reviewed and data is consistently gathered to evaluate their effectiveness. Okay, there's a big, obviously there's a big academic freedom issue that would come into play there, but at the same time, I think this is a very, very worthwhile project in terms of consistency, in terms of quality, and in terms, most importantly, of lowering costs of textbooks to students. The second item that I had was strongly encourage faculty to identify the availability of e-textbooks in course syllabi. So if there are existing e-books, e-texts, other kinds of resources that are open educational resources or open source, encourage or in fact require faculty to list those in their syllabi so at least students know the availability of them so that they're available to them for a lower cost. That was it under educational resources and materials that I had. Under educational quality, which is the third one, the first item I had was develop online course guidelines and standards for excellence in online courses. For example, model courses. We've all been talking about model courses for years, and this may be something that we might want to elevate to a statewide level. That was, by the way, recommended by the Excellence Group. The second one I have is standardized course shells. Should the coordinating board consider developing standardized open source courses on a statewide level? It's kind of a similar theme for our most highly enrolled courses, probably most notably the core curriculum. Consider putting together a select group of faculty from a did I read this one right? For a select number of faculty from across the state? Yeah, I did. Okay. You've got them already. Okay, good. I'm sorry. I just repeated myself. Just reading through my notes here for just a moment, so just give me a moment. The third one is formal evaluation. How are courses evaluated by students, peers, chairpersons, etc.? What external standards, aside from SACS, are colleges and universities using for formal evaluation? If we can standardize evaluation perhaps of student learning outcomes or program student learning outcomes, or standardize some sense of course evaluation, that probably would be a good thing for the state to be able to do. That all comes under the educational quality heading. Let's see here. I have two more very quickly. Effective faculty, the fourth one is effective faculty training and course design, online pedagogy, and technology. That's kind of the question that I was asking the Commerce folks when they were on the phone conference today. It was great that they had a training program for their learning management system, which I think was eCollege, I think is what it was. But do they have an effective training program for training faculty to teach online effectively, as opposed to just saying, okay, if I put the mouse here and click on here, that's what's going to happen in my LMS, but what's the best way to promote student engagement in an online course? What's the best way to get students involved? What are the best group activities? What are the best individual activities? How do I teach better in an online course rather than just simply convert the content over to an online format, which we know is just doesn't work as well as other pedagogical approaches. The last one I have, Van, is teaching. Under this heading of educational quality, how are higher education faculty trained to effectively teach using various delivery modalities? Again, it's very, very similar to what I just said before. Should certification be a requirement? That was recommended by the Excellence Group also. Should there be a statewide certification? I don't know. We're just tossing out that idea for discussion right now. Last overall heading I had was student success. First one I had is adopt methods for screening student suitability for success in online courses and put in place services to support student success. That was obviously from the Success Group. But we really need to talk about what kinds of services they are. Would it mean mandatory orientations? Would it mean use of a tool like Smarter Measure? That sort of thing. Second one is mandatory online orientations again. Should we require students to pass a mandatory orientation to enter the class for the first time? Or one of the recommendations from the Excellence Group also was orientation should include a syllabus quiz. I know many faculty include that in their online courses, where the first thing a student needs to do is take a syllabus quiz to demonstrate that they at least have some knowledge of what's going to be required in the course. Any other items also specifically related to a student's understanding of what their commitment is going to be when they first enter a course. Third one I have is distance learning student retention and persistence data. And I said this one under another heading, but it's retention and persistence data for developmental education. That to me is also under the student success heading. Are learning outcomes, again, comparable to other delivery modes? I know at least at the community college level, this is clearly an area of emphasis, of key emphasis for the immediate future. For us, and it will help us, at least at the community college level, of moving towards better student success. Just a few more. Increased learning outcomes measures by formative and summative assessment as indicators of student success. And how is that related to online education? And I don't want to go too fast. I want to allow you to be able to type, Van. Each institution, another one, each institution should include student success metrics in their online courses, make efforts to map predictors of success for the particular population, and develop strategies for student and faculty support. That kind of gets into learning analytics a little bit. It kind of hints at learning analytics at least, which I think is going to be looming larger and larger as we head into the future as well. Predictive analytics and that sort of thing. Only two more, I promise. Late registration. Do away with late registration. I know we've done that at our college. Statistics, research also, I do believe, clearly supports that students who register late don't succeed as well in those courses compared to students that do register on time. So, and I know at our college we've eliminated late registration entirely as a result of the same. I see some nodding of heads here, yeah. And the last one that I had, which also came from the Excellence Group, is revisit the Carnegie Unit, the course credit hour, move the focus from seat time to learning outcomes. How do we define success? Are we currently measuring the wrong end of the student? Are we measuring them completing the class as being student success, or should we measure success as how well they meet the student learning outcomes as stated in the course, which may be a better measure of how students succeed, whether they know the material, as opposed to simply completing. And I know I've been a little bit long-winded, but those are the ones that I just wanted to start the discussion going with. 4 major categories again. State and institutional policy changes, educational resources and materials, educational quality, and student success. I'd like to hear from the rest of the group. So please, whoever has something to chime in or wants to expand on some of the areas that I brought up. Ron, did you have a comment?
There is one issue that didn't make this list, but it seemed odd to me, and it was the one we talked a lot about, and it was the transfer, efficient transfer. That was the one, that issue was more or less number one in that advisory committee report given to the coordinating board. It was at the top of the list of coordinating board recommendations to the governor. And at that higher ed summit on a panel I sat on, that was the number one issue everybody identified. And it seems, it just seemed odd to neglect that.
I think the reason why you didn't see it in the document, Ron, is that it's later on in the document under other issues. We tried to group together things that most directly dealt with distance education. And it could be that the committee has something specific to say about transfer as it relates to distance education, but the focus of this report really has to remain very tightly focused on distance ed and particularly online education. But if there's a way in which transfer needs to be talked about in that context, then by all means, we want to make sure that we include it there.
Let's go around the room. I don't know exactly where to start, but Brett, is it okay if we start with you?
Of course.
And please add to that and make whatever comments you want. Thanks.
Yeah. I actually agree with Ron on the transfer issue. We've run across a couple times directly within distance education where a receiving institution has asked, was that course taken online or not? Because there was a perception of quality. You know, if it was done online, then maybe we won't accept it because they didn't learn as well. So, but I think that can be taken care of, or those transfers can be taken care of by supporting everything from student metrics to, to the learning outcomes and shifting, as you mentioned, shifting the emphasis not on seat time but on the learning outcomes themselves and being more transparent in that within distance education. I don't think we've really partitioned the data out to show the difference on at the learning outcomes level between distance education and their face-to-face counterparts. So I think if that's done, some of those transfer issues will at least those transfer issues directly related to distance education will disappear.
Right. In fact, I don't. This is something I brought up in the last meeting, and I completely agree with your point. I think it's a very, very worthwhile point, and I think it should be something that, my only opinion is that it should be something that's included in the report. And I know all of us are in various levels, and I was having a conversation with Marshall right before the meeting started, resumed again, and that is all of us are at varying levels of being able to analyze student learning outcomes, whether they be from the courses or from the entire programs, entire departments or programs. But one of the things that we do, and I know that SACS requires, is that separate populations of students are assessed on the same learning outcomes using the same assessment methods, but they're assessed separately. And that speaks directly to the issue that you just brought up. Distance education students, even if they're taking English 1301, are assessed on whatever those, at least in our college, on the same program student learning outcomes as those students who are taking it in a face-to-face environment, but the results are not combined. The results are separated out. And so we are making a clear comparison to see what the performance of students are in terms of PSLOs for those distance learning students as compared to those face-to-face students. And we are seeing some, in many cases, we're seeing some marked differences. And I think that's a good practice, and it's also something that SACS is requiring of us.
Mm-hmm. And it's something that allows us to know what areas to focus on for professional development and so on. As far as the list, I very similarly to your list, but on curriculum changes, I also did add to commission additional research to study the success of the shortened or flexible course options, because that one, as they have grown, I know at our institution several years ago we had different lengths of flexible course options. We had, of course, our normal semester 16 weeks, but then we also had 14 weeks, 12, 10, 8, and 5. We had this plethora of different varieties, and it affected everything from room scheduling, if it was a face-to-face, to online. Really, how often do we update the LMS with the student data? Once we looked at it several years ago as far as student success rates, we saw that the 8-week courses in our particular case, 8-week courses were not the best. 5-week courses were the best, and 12-week courses were the best, but 8-week courses were worse. And so we eliminated that one as an option. But that's just in our case, and it may not be in everybody's.
Those were 8-week fully online courses, right?
8-week fully online was the worst.
Right.
Yeah, and we thought that, originally we thought that would be a great option because we could use 8-week courses to accelerate developmental. We could put 2 8-week courses back to back, and you could have 2 levels of developmental or 1 level of developmental, and then the first level of, English 1301 or Math 1314 or so on. But it turned out that the 8-week course was worse than a 5-week course.
Some initial research, and I don't think nearly enough has been done on it so far, but some of the initial research is showing that 8-week courses presented in a hybrid format are more effective than distance ed or face-to-face courses. But that's a different animal.
Yeah, it's
entirely.
a different animal, and actually we conducted that research as well, and our research and analytical services did a program brief that showed that exact same thing, that hybrid courses had a higher success rate than either of the other two. But that's the only one that I would add to the list that you already gave.
And that might be noted, Van, in the report, in that the at least initial research over the last couple of years, I want to say sketchy, but I'm saying it's minimal at this point, has indicated that hybrid 8-week courses seem to have the most student success, at least in terms of completion. I don't know about SLOs, but at least in terms of completion, because I think that's where the research studies were focused. Is there anything else?
No, that's it.
Ann, did you have any comments? We're just going to go around the room. I didn't have the mic on, that's fine.
There are a couple of things that primarily interest me, and that is creating purchasing pools to purchase technology and possible learning management systems. And I think what Ron has done with the VCT, again, is the perfect model for that. Also, the consideration of more open sources for community colleges.
Two things that I had that are not real different from what you've just said, but standardizing the metrics for cost effectiveness. I get so many requests from data from system auditors, the president, sometimes the coordinating board, all over, and they're never in exactly the same form. And not only that, I think all of us could collect our cost effectiveness data differently. So it would be wonderful if we could standardize that in some way to really get at the question a little bit better.
And that would be under, and I'm going to ask everybody to do this, that would be under the state and institutional policy changes, if we could standardize those metrics.
Right.
So when we come around to you, and if you have recommendations or additions to make, tell us what general overall heading they would be in, or if they are a new overall heading. If they're not, tell us what sub-issue it would be and what the category, major heading of the category would be. Just helps us organize it as we go along.
And then under student success, I would like to see some more research on exactly which student services and student support services are effective for online students. I think right now we're all in the mode of trying to make sure we provide the same student support services and the same level of support that we do on campus. But I'd like to see some research that tells us, are those same exact services the ones that online students really need?
Good, thanks. Kingston?
The one element I'm pleased to see is beginning to get addressed here is what to do with the training of instructors. Because I think for a long time the conversation was really about content and quality of content, student preparation for doing online work, with almost no reference at all to what needed to be done with the instructors. I believe more attention needs to be paid to how the management of instructor training could be handled, probably taking into account the fact that, you know, you have instructors who are sort of the tail end of their time in the system, some of whom are not really willing to invest any more time in doing new things or doing the same things in a different way, and a lot of new faculty coming in. So, you know, the approach may need to be different depending on which group you're dealing with. The other element, which I think has not been included here, but was in an earlier version of one of the reports, was the idea of you talking about how modularization would help a student move through quickly towards a particular course that they actually needed for credit. And there was a reference to the idea of using credit by examination as a mechanism to achieve that. And this is something that I have seen done elsewhere. Right. But almost every time I've opened my mouth to suggest that in this environment, not in this committee, but in the Texas higher ed environment, it's almost like a no-no. And yet I know that it's done in a lot of other places.
I think there are some institutions in Texas that are doing that. I believe that there are. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a good suggestion. That would be under what? State and institutional policy? No.
Student success.
Student success? Okay.
And affordability, I think.
Yeah, I think.
And affordability, yeah.
Okay.
I think that can go into the institutional policies as well, because since it has the SACS implications, we always have to report that to SACS as far as the credit by exam and what are the standards that we're doing. I think it affects a lot of other policies that we may have within our institution, and, you know, so I wouldn't necessarily exclude it from that area.
Yeah, I think it crosses over a couple of different areas. Good suggestion, Bill. Thank you. Sherry.
Okay, I don't really have a lot of, I mean, I think this has been, people have definitely summarized the things. The only thing I would add is under the state and institutional policy change, number 5, coordinating boards should promote interinstitutional development and sharing of online courses. State should provide funding to develop interinstitutional consortia. So I think it takes from the VCT model. It's the sharing of courses, or developing some shared courses. Georgia, and it's been a long time since I've done the research on this, but the state of Georgia did, I thought, some pretty extensive, their system took, and I'll just use history as an example, they took the faculty with history and came up with a good, solid history course. They share, if I remember it correctly, they share the teaching responsibility among the different institutions, but pretty much the core development of that remained the same. Now, each faculty member, based on their, if their institution was teaching it, they could add what they wanted to it, but the core of that information remained the same. Has anyone done any, this is, like I said, it's been quite some time, but doing something like that, I think there's a lot of leverage that we could be using.
Well, this to me sounds a little bit like, and Ron, you may want to comment on this too, sounds like model courses, a little bit like model courses. And again, from a personal standpoint, from what we do at our college, is that we have probably about 30 to 35 different model courses right now, pretty much developed on student demand, enrollment, and so they pretty much are developed in the core curriculum areas, but then there's some that are also outside of that. But the course can be used in either a fully online, a hybrid, or what we call a web enhanced, which is a face-to-face course but with a significant internet component to it. And the course doesn't necessarily have to be taught exactly the way it's laid out as an online model course. The faculty has the flexibility to be able to customize and personalize that course however they want to, and to be able to put in their own assignments and put in their own modules or put in their own readings or put in their own discussions or whatever they might be to customize that. But at least we know in that respect the faculty is starting off with a fairly high quality course that has been team developed by a number of faculty at our college.
Versus
is that kind of where you're going with this?
Yes, that's exactly it.
Okay.
Yeah, versus the one that was developed by the textbook companies and so on. But yes, that is what I'm. Yes, exactly. Yeah, so that is where I'm going. So that's all I have.
Just building on your comment about Georgia, I believe that their higher education system, they all have the same LMS. And they recently switched from Blackboard to something else. But that helps also with that team teaching and development and so on, which you probably would find a challenge here in Texas. But it's I think one way we could move in that direction is expanding the Texas Learning Object Repository. I just pulled it up to see what we had up there right now, and there are like 16 authors. 3 of them are at North Texas, and they're basically the same person. It's a team. But I think it's greatly underutilized, because if we want to do some of these things with open educational resources, we have to have them someplace where we can organize them, peer review them, make them available widely. So I'd like to see that that expanded. And you did cover in your list most of the things I was going, okay, that one's gone, that one's gone. But that's okay. I mean, I think that got to the heart of it. Those are the big picture issues. The other one that I wanted to mention and maybe reframe even just slightly was the transfer issue. I think it is exacerbated by distance learning because it does make our students so much more mobile. So it's coming up with more and more frequency, and there is the question about, well, is it quality? But really it's just they have this opportunity to take off a menu of different community colleges, universities, and we need a way for them to know that it all adds up to a degree and it doesn't cost them a whole lot more to get there. So those were the 2 that I think I had that weren't already mentioned.
Thank you. Gay, you're not going to escape this. Do you have any comments? I'm going to call on you. No? Okay, let's move on. Marshall? I just wanted to give you the opportunity, Gay. I'm sorry.
I think all the good ones have been taken. A couple of things, and maybe they're just modifiers really than they are separate items, but given the challenges that we're having around STEM, as we look at opportunities to develop curriculum across the state that can be leveraged, I think that we ought to pay particular attention to STEM. They're typically more expensive courses to develop. I think we get a greater ROI when we focus on those kinds of activities, and so I would encourage us to, as we look at course redesign and interinstitutional collaboration, that maybe STEM ought to be a focus of those kinds of activities. The only other point I would add, and I'm not so sure it's completely in alignment with distance learning, but when you look at programs that are preparing people for the workforce, a huge component is internships. And I'm not sure what role the state could play in terms of connecting students and graduates in online programs with internships, but it's important. We've got a lot of programs that rely on field-based work. And when we're trying to deal with those remote students that may be on the other side of the state, there really is no infrastructure in place to support a Lamar or a Houston or a UNT to find internship opportunities for a student in El Paso, for example. And just to kind of give you some context, we had an energy industry higher ed conclave in Houston a couple of weeks ago, and they said that was the most critical piece in terms of hiring decisions was completion of internships with companies. And so some way to make that partnership more effective, I think, would be incredibly helpful for a lot of our institutions.
Before we go much further, and I know, Marshall, you have to leave at 2 o'clock, right? You mentioned that you leave at 2 o'clock to catch a flight. But I think it's just as significant for all of us as we go around to repeat some of the issues and not just try to fill in the blanks of what someone before has mentioned, because that would bring to the top those key issues that we feel as a group. So if you have anything else that was like on the top of your list that we've already said, would be a really good thing to mention.
Okay, now since you've mentioned that, I mean, I do think that getting a better handle on data as it relates to student success by demographic group is really important. I mean, as we're looking at especially helping the state close achievement gaps among African American males, Latinos, we need to know if online learning is an effective strategy to do that. And if it's not, then we need to modify the kinds of online learning assets that we're currently deploying. But at this point, we really don't have a good sense in terms of, what are the student learning outcomes for various ethnic demographic groups as it pertains to online learning. And it's difficult to map it into a successful strategy until we really have a better handle on the data.
Okay, great. Yes, Jerry, go ahead.
I think most of the points have been already made, and one point that I really would like to, I don't know if it relates to distance learning or not, but it has to do with formal evaluation. It says, the point here says, how are courses evaluated by students, peers, and chairpersons? Okay, that seems to target a process, but what do you do with the outcome? In other words, I get evaluated. Well, does the chair give me just the paper, I sign it, and is that it? Do I have some say so in terms of yes, this is what you're doing wrong, this you need to do this, especially in the online field, because I feel that some of the chairs that are evaluated are not very well versed in online, or they're perhaps not teaching online, and they might not. Now there are some that are teaching that they might have a better grasp of how to evaluate versus the chairs that don't. So I see that as an issue, and I see perhaps peer evaluation. Perhaps Mark can address some of that in terms of using the instrument that he has for peer evaluation, where perhaps somebody else can come in and chime, hey, you know what, you're doing this, but maybe you should try this. I think that would have a better quality in the sense of a good course per se.
Are you talking about standardizing that? Are you talking about standardizing an online instructors? I'm trying to get this straight in my head. A component of their teaching will be their online instruction, and not be all of their teaching.
Right.
But you're talking about standardizing some sort of an evaluation rubric?
Right.
And then also standardizing the evaluation of how that rubric is used and how the results are reported?
Right. And what do you do about it? In other words, even like you say, in this case, if you have a peer group doing the evaluation, perhaps you get a better insight of a good course than somebody that might not have the actual capacity to learn to the ins and outs of the LMS system. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay. Anything else?
Nope.
Even what we've talked about before that you want to emphasize?
Not right now.
Okay. Daniel. Did you have a comment, Ron? I'm sorry. Okay.
One thing that I agree with is the metrics and the data that we generate, because just like we talked about today, just the survey that Van is working on as far as that Rider 57, everybody's collecting different data, and it comes to question on how valuable that process is when a lot of commonality can't be done. And I think if we're going to move forward to really assess the effectiveness of any of these changes in policy or whatever, we have to be able to collect the data to get that, whether it's in student success areas or cost data on that. So I think metrics is one of the big things, and I like what you mentioned about it before. The affordability and of course the textbooks and e-learnings, the costs of those types of things are good, but from a community college standpoint, I know other colleagues that have been in states where they've gone to a one system and it doesn't fit all, or so they've got a selection of maybe two systems you can kind of go to, and with the variability in the situations our colleges find ourselves in, the affordability of it's good to get a good deal, but can you even afford the good deal? And so I think there's some issue with how that may all shake out, and ability of so many varied institutions being able to fit.
Van, remind me, was it Washington and Oregon that we were talking about last week? Washington, was it? And I hope I'm correct in saying this, but has actually developed a mandate, or no, it has started a project, that's probably the best way to put it, where they're going to be developing textbooks for their core curriculum. Maybe you can expand that a little bit.
Washington started a project last year where they're using teams of their community college faculty to develop electronic OER texts for their core curriculum courses that are shared by the community college. And they're doing it specifically within the community college system. I don't know if they've finished the development of that yet.
I don't think
they have. I don't think they have, and I don't think they know yet what the sort of usage will be. If we are interested in beginning to move in that direction, I have some contacts with the folks in Washington State that would be able to provide us more information about that project, as well as some contacts with Creative Commons, who, as you know, is now launching a major campaign looking at open educational resources, both globally and nationally.
And I think we're going to see that theme again and again and again as we move forward.
I like the comments about the VCT model and how it's been utilized and rolled out, because I think, at least from the community college standpoint, we have really gained from that model and how it's been implemented. I agree with Marshall about the STEM focus, and even about the internships with Temple College so vested in the allied health programs. You know, those internships and those experiences, if you wanted to use online to go in that direction, of course you're going to have that alignment to get those done. And especially in the STEM fields, just bioscience in this state is so varied, and even within that industry we haven't connected to where it's a unified approach statewide. And so by helping industry through the collaboration of unifying it in the education process, it could lend itself to really solidifying that workforce and bringing those workforce connections, because just about everything I sit on is, you know, how do we get workforce to the table to help with our advisory boards, those internships. And health, I mean, they're the limiting factor on how successful a lot of programs are, and the economy of how those programs could add more nursing and things. It's the limiting factor in those internships. I think that's a critical component to fit in to the distance education model, especially if you want to put some of these online. In the rural areas where we need some of those programs, I think it'd be advantageous to have that available.
Does that come under the educational quality heading, or where would you see that coming?
Probably quality in.
We're sorry. Your conference is ending now. Please hang up.
The state policy issue of really getting as kind of almost a state mandate or state direction that then we could, under a quality issue.
I'm just looking for a home for some of these comments, just to make sure we can try to, because part of the goal of today's meeting is to come out with at least a rough outline of where we want to go. Ron.
Well, I'm going to sound like a broken record here. But that's all right.
You already do.
Thank you. No, I want to look at items number 1 and 2 under high priority issues, Roman numeral 3, A, under state and institutional policy changes. I still think those items are important, and I think they're absolutely interconnected.
Which ones?
The state and institutional policy changes recommended higher education institutions individually and collaboratively provide more visibility marketing related to programs offered online. 2, this coordinating board play a role in developing a central site where states' online degree programs portfolio could be accessed. Those two are very related. We've got those for profit institutions out there just advertising their online programs like crazy. And if the sheer volume of what Texas would be able to make accessible and make colleges everyone aware of would be impressive. And furthermore, I sincerely believe students need to know how access to these things without having to go to your individual websites and dig for it, so they can even do some comparative shopping for affordability purposes. So anyway, as I said, I had to get my shot in as my broken record here. On another issue, the business of collaborating and developing online courses, etc., and having model courses, I just want to give you some information about SoftChalk, their new version 8, which I'm very excited about, that the community colleges, of course, have the collaborative license to. But SoftChalk is moving to the cloud. And the individual lessons, all the lessons will reside in the cloud. They may be accessed, of course, from any device. And they are platform independent in regard to the learning management system, because all it will matter to the learning management system is a link, and that's all there is to it. So it's among community colleges, courses that are done by SoftChalk now will be infinitely shareable. Furthermore, in collaborating, you can set up a special folder for a course. If several faculty want to work on it together, they can all work on it and collaborate in developing the course together. But it's just exceptional. It will be very, very easy to access anywhere. But I was just really excited when that was the new big element in SoftChalk for their new release.
So that comes under the major heading of cooperatively.
Well, there was
collaborative
That
collaboration.
one was, but there was one of these items in here was about collaboratively developing courseware
or learning objects, for that matter. It doesn't have to be full courses
and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Or you can use it for learning objects.
Sure. Okay, great, thanks, Mark.
Well, I guess I'll start off with the one that's kind of been a sacred item that really hasn't gotten much publicity because nobody wants to talk about it, and that's teaching. And, going back to some of the items that you mentioned, I hate to give away any secrets, but quite often we'll hire somebody and have them do a 5-minute example of teaching, which is typically, I better do a talking head because there will be a bunch of people in the room. And then we wave a wand and automatically they're educational experts. And how they teach, well, they teach the way they were taught. And, going way back to Bloom, we know that lecture is probably the most efficient way to get a lot of material out. However, it's the least effective way to learn. Yet when you look at the data and pick anybody's, way up in the high 90s, 98 or so % of our teaching is talking head lecture, which raises the question, if we're higher ed institutions, then why we ignore our own research? So that's why I think the pedagogy piece should be way, way up at the top. And we don't have that many programs across the state where we bring in brand new faculty or even traditional faculty and say, by the way, here's the way that's the most effective ways to teach and most effective ways for students to learn. So that's really, really high on my list. And I think that kind of fits under a couple of categories, but certainly the pedagogy piece needs to be up there.
I want to throw in a related thought to that too, which I know we're all aware of, and that's instructional design. Because that plays very, very heavily into course quality, it plays heavily into pedagogy and that sort of thing. And I think that, in my opinion, ought to be something that's at least mentioned and researched, the value in this report, the value of instructional design input into course development and course quality, ongoing course quality as well. Learner-centered instructional design strategies are critical because, just like you said, we're leaving the lecture model behind. And it is and has been proven to be the least effective way of learning, if you will, or of student retention and absorption of that material.
Right, and one item that's not been mentioned in any of our materials yet, but I think it's a piece that's going to take the spotlight very quickly. The piece that's missing from most of our courses is the adaptive teaching and adaptive learning piece. Now, we've seen some big strides with things like My Math Lab or even the Khan Academy, when they talk about it's really effective because students can go back and replay it over and over and over. Now, the Khan Academy videos don't necessarily jump right out and say, oh, by the way, did you learn it? But we do have software that does that. However, for an everyday instructor, or pretty much anybody nowadays, just to sit down and say, I'm going to write, design, or build something like that, it's next to impossible. We just don't have the time or resources. So that's where a big collaborative effort could be made, not just by publishers, but we need to find for all of our different disciplines this adaptive piece that can be put in the course shells. Because I don't know how many courses I've seen, and faculty as well as their administrative staff think these are great courses, when in reality they're correspondence courses with no correspondence. Read chapter 1. Here's a PowerPoint from the publisher. I don't know what you do with it. It doesn't do anything, but here it is. And now take a bubble test.
Now there'll be a quiz on it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's true, false, or multiple choice. And that's the entire course. And what scares me, and this piece goes up under our data collection, when we do the data collection and say, all right, we need to see, are these online or blended or whatever courses as good as our face-to-face? What are we comparing? Are we comparing the ones where people have just now jumped in and think that truly is a good course? Or are we comparing the ones that really utilize some of the latest, greatest technologies, adaptive teaching, adaptive learning, student engagement? And that's completely missing from the one that just says read the chapter. So that's what scares me about the data collection, is that we'll rush out, we'll collect a lot of data on some really, really poor courses and poor teaching, and then make decisions based on that. So that kind of goes under both.
I think a good research resource, Van, if we don't have it already on the list, I don't remember if I saw it on your document, is CESI. It's on there already, Community College Survey of Student Engagement, and NESI, which is its counterpart, obviously, for the four-year schools, yeah, because they have loads of data on what creates good student engagement, and they're now getting into online assessment as well of student engagement.
Also under policy, I think our Carnegie unit for the credit hour, we're somewhat bound by that definition, and I think that should go up under policy as well. We're basing our courses on a full semester. Even if you know it, too bad, you're going to have to sit here till the end of the semester type model. Financial aid plays into that, even though we don't have, individually, we don't have much control over it. But a lot of times the students being able to participate in flex courses, open entry, open exit type courses, a lot of times those are limited by the institution's ability to figure out how to handle the financial aid for those. So I see that as a barrier, especially to a lot of our students who depend on financial aid.
Under student success?
That and probably policy. It could fit under both.
Right.
Yeah. And as far as open source materials, just building on what Ron was talking about, one of the things that he left out was a statewide project for Biology 1408, which was developed in SoftChalk and, in SCORM, whichever version is the standard. Still, with these courses, you could take these and plug them in wherever you needed them. Now, again, going back to the teaching model, if we hire somebody the week or 2 weeks before classes start and say, oh, by the way, you're teaching an online course, and I know there's this thing called academic freedom, therefore you won't want to use anybody else's material, you'll just develop it from scratch. how do you develop a quality online class in 1 or 2 weeks that has all this fantastic material in it, videos, interactive material? How do you do that in a week or 2 weeks? And I'm shocked at the number of faculty who actually aren't interested in some of these, like the biology course, going in saying, oh, I like this, I don't like that, I'm going to tweak it. You know, you can reconfigure these courses. And I'm afraid that we're getting to the point where some of these for-profits are going to eat our lunch, because they do have the management structure where they can say, this is the best course in the world. And we've bought all these materials or paid for the development of all these materials, and everybody's going to use it, so now you don't waste your time reinventing the wheel. And I'm afraid most of our faculty just reinvent the wheel even when they don't have to. And I think if we had some statewide efforts to really, really pump up some high quality courses, that we could up the quality of our courses just from the shells. And I don't know how many thousands and thousands of people hours we would save if people could go out and just take this high quality material and start using it. Now, I know a lot of publishers have prepackaged shells, but then that raises the question, if now as a state we're getting these state student learning outcomes, theoretically you should design with the end in mind. Publishers don't necessarily go look at our outcomes and build their course exactly to fit. So again, we may buy a shell from a publisher and then later go, oh my gosh, it's time to report. How do I map these back to whatever the outcomes are? And then we have a big panic.
Creating good model courses or master courses is just one of the steps. And this is not a criticism of faculty when I'm going to say this, but getting them to, or teaching it effectively is the next step.
Absolutely.
And you can have a very well-designed course, but if it's not taught effectively, it's not going to go anywhere. As one of my professors used to say, the trick is not leading the horse to water, the trick is making the horse thirsty.
Absolutely.
And how you motivate faculty and others who are involved in the process of good pedagogy to motivate them to be able to not only just develop the best product, but also teach the best product and teach it most effectively.
And I think that's becoming apparent with a lot of our blended or hybrid courses. When you hear faculty, you say, well, I see you're teaching a blended course, and they say, and they aren't joking, yeah, now I'm going to have to talk twice as fast. You're like, why are you talking at all? Well, I wouldn't know what to do if I didn't otherwise. So I think that's bringing to the forefront now that a lot of our folks, when they're faced with a hybrid model, they're like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And what do the students do outside of class? Do I just have them read the chapter, or, and they haven't gotten the concept of flipping the class or doing this reverse design model. So I think that's real critical.
I'm
Yes.
so glad you brought up pedagogy, because I've been sitting here for the last 10 minutes wishing I had said something about it. And if we remember an earlier conversation this morning with an institution, what did we keep asking? What about the pedagogy in your training? And so if we had some statewide model or guidelines or whatever for that, I think that would help a lot.
Or training modules.
Yes.
That could be shared.
Yes.
Yeah.
If I could jump in real quick, one of the things that strikes me, listening to the conversation that Mark raised, and he never short of ideas. I mean, really interesting stuff. From a policy perspective, I'm thinking, how do we move the needle in a thoughtful way that really gets the institutions actively engaged in the conversation? I think if we have the conversation at a philosophical level, we'll be having the conversation 1, 2, 3 years from now, because there's so much inertia in our institutions that it's going to be really difficult to move forward. Some of you may be familiar with University of Central Florida, founded in '63. It's the third largest university in the United States now. Students are required to take an online or hybrid course every semester from the minute they enroll. And one of the recommendations that's here, and I'm not saying this is the way exactly to go about it, but it does seem to me as though it pushes the needle pretty seriously if students are going to be required to take a certain number of electronic courses in their program of study. I think it's actually come up in conversations in the legislature before.
It was in legislation.
Yeah, and it speaks to affordability. It speaks to questions about time to degree, and it also speaks to pedagogical effectiveness. And at least from a policy perspective, it would seem to me as though that would probably be the most significant action that could be taken that would really require institutions to take this seriously at the very highest level. Then finally, just a little anecdote here. There's a publisher that I won't mention. First word is M, second word is Hill. You can probably figure out who it is. But they have a U.S. government textbook electronically. And pretty fabulous content, but they have a test bank of 25,000 questions that go with the book. And so we had a group of faculty, and they were just ecstatic about how great the content was. And then they would essentially use the McGraw-Hill assessments that they hadn't reviewed. So God only knows what those poor kids were getting tested over whenever they were completing a chapter or a unit. And so, to me, there's I'm concerned about the extent to which publishers are teaching our courses today. And I think part of it is the absence of good OER that we could share collaboratively that's actually been vetted and really thought through in terms of how it's going to be executed. Because the publishers really don't care how the stuff is executed. They really care about the number of licenses that they sell or texts that they produce. So anyway, that's all I had to say on that.
Well, keep in mind, too, in the cost efficiency report that came up last year, one of the recommendations was to require students or colleges to have their students take 10% of all their courses at a distance. So, but I had one other item I wanted to come back to, and that was transfer. I'm not sure of the reason, but I'm getting a lot of comments back from various division chairs and others where a variety of universities now are pushing back and saying, now, are these courses offered online? If they are, we're not going to accept them. So that's come back to us many times, and I think it is an issue. And then if you look at, even with the virtual college, if you look at participation within the Virtual College of Texas, we have a number of institutions where they may say for one reason or the other, I'm not going to take a course from so-and-so or from someone else because it's not like ours, or it's not whatever, the quality, whatever it may be. And that kind of flies in the face of what we've worked for all these years with common course manuals and common course numbering and those types of things. And I was hoping Ron would mention the discussion the other day about the degrees. Because with the Virtual College of Texas, if you put together all the degree programs that are available at all of our community colleges, that gives the students of Texas a wonderful opportunity to be able to take everything they can close to home, and then if their institution doesn't have that particular degree, then they can transfer and finish the degree at some other community college online. And that's a wonderful opportunity if we can offer that to our students.
Okay. Thank you. Dawn.
Matt says I've been too quiet today. I have to take up the heavy mantle of the faculty perspective.
Okay.
A lot of the things I have are similar to what's on the list. My top one was standardized reporting. And as a faculty member, a lot of times I'm asked to present data, and the way that the question is phrased, it's so vague that we're not sure what they want. And we're seeing this now with the question that y'all had us take back regarding the top online course delivery. But it doesn't really have to be online, or maybe it does, but we're not sure. So if we had a better idea of standardized terminology and standardized data so that we know we're talking about the same thing, we're collecting the same data, it would be easier for us to know exactly, first of all, what we're doing and then what to do with the results. Developmental ed, I had put down to examine successful models and find ways that we can meet the students' needs effectively and efficiently while maintaining high standards and academic freedom. And I put that under excellence in student success. I had one that I just called student success, so obviously that's where it goes. And this went back to the idea of having student skills and orientations being compatible with distance ed. And I mentioned that every college that offers distance education should have fully online services. And the ones that I identified in particular as being valuable are counseling, meaning like not just what courses you should take, but actual counseling, like maybe career counseling or even mental health counseling, advising, financial aid, library, business office, and student life. That way your online students will be able to participate in everything that's going on campus. Model courses, faculty perspective on model courses. I was in the excellence group that talked about this, and I wanted to add a few caveats. And I'd like to see a series of model courses for all core subjects, but with multiple models for implementation. I don't want them to say, this is the English 1301 course. There's a dozen different ways that we could teach English 1301 and have it be effective. And make sure that the courses meet both disciplinary standards and online quality standards. And maybe that could be done with a combination of SACS guidelines, state guidelines, and then something that's specific to your institution. Allow for institutional and faculty modification of courses to meet local student needs and protect academic freedom. Allow for faculty to submit their own courses to be approved for model course status. And if somebody's developed something that's really spectacular and they're at Panola or they're at Temple or at Blinn, then I'd love to see it. Maybe it's something that I could use myself. Course flexibility, offering more options in terms of the ways that we deliver courses, specifically accelerated, open entry, open exit, and competency-based. And we need to look at what we're currently offering to see what's successful, what's not. I mean, I'm sure some of us, well, Stephen already mentioned they've done that institutionally. Or no, it was Brett mentioned that y'all had done that and looked at the 8-week course is not working. And see what kinds of things seem to work. And that may be an institutional thing more than a state thing. But we also need to look at trends in terms of the way students enroll for these courses. And then the big one was faculty support and teaching. And I mentioned that I thought that we needed to have some basic online pedagogical standards to be met by all faculty who teach online in the state. And for that matter, it ought to be for all faculty who teach in the state. Well, just sometimes I get a little...
Again, let's keep ourselves to distance ed and hybrid courses.
I'm sorry, I just get a little uncomfortable sometimes that online faculty get the microscope and other people are allowed to be talking heads.
Sure.
There should be institutional options to meet local needs because there may be something specific to your student population or your discipline that wouldn't be covered in the state standards. A big one we haven't talked about yet, make sure that adjuncts have the same support and standards. I really don't like the idea that an adjunct can be picked up off the street and popped into a canned course and say, well, you're going to teach it now. Now, it seems to me that those folks ought to have the same training as everyone else. They ought to have the same standards as everyone else. They ought to have the same academic freedom as everyone else. All faculty should be trained to use their college's learning management system. Not necessarily just those who teach online, but all faculty. I think that's a good step towards getting better distance education because if all your faculty know about the LMS, then even if they're teaching straight face-to-face, they'll use it and the students will be familiar with it and they'll get more practice with it. All online courses should be peer-reviewed institutionally using SACS state and institutional guidelines. That way you're sure that you have a series of quality courses.
Say that last one again. I didn't quite catch all of it.
All online courses should be peer-reviewed institutionally.
Peer-reviewed. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
So in Instead of just putting something out there or just having it looked at by the tech people. And one of the best practices we do at my college is there's a team of people who looks at a course. And it's folks from our instructional innovation, but it's also disciplinary experts. The department chair comes, and people who are LMS experts. And sometimes some of those people overlap. But it's useful because that way you get a multidisciplinary perspective on what you're doing.
Yeah, and that's the way our model courses are developed. They're by a team typically of 3 faculty, plus an instructional designer, and then a peer reviewer also, who's usually our program coordinator or discipline chair. So it's a team-developed course.
Yes.
So, okay, thanks. Is that it?
Yes.
Ron, real quick, because I want to move along.
Comment. I've heard peer review mentioned several times today, a couple of times. If you ever get seriously interested in this, VCT has an online peer review system that we actually got from the UT Telecampus. It was the one that they developed, and we took it and did a lot of modifications to make it more user-friendly that would work for for anyone. But if you ever were any of your institutions were ever interested in, I'm sure we could arrange to make sure you had access to it, or just simply give you the code and you can do with it as you please. But be aware. The UT Telecampus, it was developed in Flash, which is a little idiosyncratic. I mean, it works just great. Blinn used it for a major peer review process, 300 courses, and they're still using it, and it worked just fine. So anyway, I just want to let you know that really is a resource that's out there if anybody is interested in really getting seriously into peer review of courses.
Yeah, I think it should certainly go under our resource section because it's a tool that might not work for everybody, but we latched onto it, and in an attempt to review all of our online and blended courses, we're using Carrot to do that. So,
sure. Matt?
Thank you, Steve. Let me begin by just offering a word of caution in terms of this report. We spent the morning talking about doctoral education, and I think we have tendency to focus we're all victims of our last 15 minutes of experience, and we have a tendency to focus the conversation on perhaps developmental education, those first 2 years, the Common Core, which are important, but graduate education is no less important. What about our PhD programs? Online? We have a number of PhD programs online. Are those graduates getting offers at top institutions across the United States or the world? How are they doing with their scholarship? How do you work with scholarship of online learners as graduate in graduate education? Are they presenting papers and referee conferences? Are they publishing? Once again, so we have to be very careful in terms of what we say, I think, and is 8 weeks better than 4 weeks? Well, it really depends a lot, so just a little bit of warning there. Also, STEM is important, but so are the humanities, for Pete's sake. And, I think we have a tendency to think about economic development, blah, 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 that we hear a mantra from the state. But let's protect the humanities. Let's protect those things that often are forgotten in terms of their value and their worth to online learners. I was at an advisory board meeting in Washington, D.C. a year and a half ago, and one a great demand in New York right now are master's degree in literature. There are learners out there that can value from those things as well. So just a caveat, not to forget the importance of that. And in terms of graduate education, who would have thought that what is happening now is happening at Johnson Space Center? And so we have a lot of people that are highly educated that are going to have to be retrained or needing retraining or leaving the States. So there's all this stuff going on in addition to those important first couple of years that we provide students. Now here are my top 5. I'll get to those right now. And I'll put them by number if you want to follow them. 5A1, follow the money. If you really want to make a difference, then redistribute the wealth to benefit online learning. Tweak the formula, 1/100th of a point for online courses versus face-to-face courses. You'll drive change that way. There's nothing to drive change at an institution like a penny. Trust me, I've been in those meetings. It's kind of like Marshall said a while ago, mandate a certain percentage of courses. Tweak the budget just a little bit in our favor, and you're going to get action on a very change resistance faculty, and that's exactly what's going on. So let's not forget the budget. Tweak it a little bit. Let's be bold and say that. Let's fund online courses just a little bit higher, and you'll get attention and things will start happening. I trust me on that. That's 5A1. Number 2, 7D on your sheet. Statewide efficient transfer system. We've got to keep thinking that way, all the way to doctoral education online. That's 7D. Number 3, rolling enrollment courses. We tried that at Texas Tech, and we could never figure out how to submit those for formula. They're a nightmare to submit to formula. It's an internal Texas kind of tweaky thing going on here. That needs to be fixed. So if you want to have a rolling enrollment, open enrollment, whatever you want to call them, flexible enrollment, you got to fix that problem. And I know Rosalind Smith, my predecessor, worked years and years on that, and nobody could figure out how to do it, so we just ran them on a cash basis, and finally I think we just gave up. But learners like those things. Number 4, data sets, common data sets. We've got to have some numbers, or we'll never make sense out of things, and we're not any closer to any common definitions and data sets, even within systems, much less between systems. That needs some more attention. And finally, this whole notion of Carnegie units. I think we have to address that. That's important. It's incredibly important to talk about. Have a conversation to talk about. What does that mean? How do you define it? How do you operationalize it? How do you constitutively define it? How did Carnegie define it? Whoever Carnegie is, I don't think he's alive anymore. But I think we need to talk more about that. So those are my 5. Thank you.
Okay, did you get them, Van? Good. Okay, Roy. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Matt.
Okay, I'm going to echo what several have said around the room. I agree with Matt and several others about data sets. But we need to be aware that there are tons of data mining tools out there that can sit on top of student information systems, and we don't want to dictate to the point of eliminating some that may work in some institutions and not work for others. So I think we have to look at that and come up with some points that we know would be acceptable to the state and would be easy for us as institutions to provide. I think this point is well made, but we need to take it a step further. We need to look at what is needed, how do we get it, what is common about it to all the institutions, and what is going to work for the state so that they can get what they need and give it back to us in a way that is meaningful to all of us. That is critical. That is high priority issue number 3. Educational quality, issue 2, standardized course shells. We've talked about this. Several people have brought this up. I think it's very important that we look at this because one of the benefits of this would be the transfer issue. If we had standardized course shells and we had it available statewide, the transfers would be, or the transfer issues would be greatly reduced. We don't really have that many transfer issues at Western Texas College. I know some of you have expressed a lot of issues with transfer. Usually with us, and we're small, we're about 2,400 enrollment, we just contact the institution and we work it out. That's not possible when you have 40,000 students. You just can't do that. But for us, it's easy for us to pick up the phone and say, okay, you're not taking this biology course, why not? And get it worked out. But I think if we standardize courses, it's going to help us in that area among the many other areas that it would help. I liked Mark's comments on teaching. I noticed years ago when I went into higher ed that what we had was a bunch of people that were very smart in English and history and science and social studies, but they didn't know how to teach. They do teach like they're teachers. The number of people that just look at me with dismay when I tell them, you cannot take your hour-long lecture and put it online and think that works as an online course. What do you mean? It works in the classroom. So we've got to do a better job, and I don't know that this is a mandate thing, but I think if we can stress it at the college level and make sure that we do something, even if it's stressing it in the education programs that these instructors go through when they're in college. Make sure that if they are majoring in history and their intent is to go into education, that there is an inclusion of some sort of pedagogy course that is part of their degree plan.
Or mandate pedagogy as a required course or series of courses when faculty decide to teach online for the first time.
Yes.
As opposed to a part of their educational training when they're in college themselves.
Right. The other point that I had was additional research to study the success of short and flexible course options, and we've covered that in here. We've had excellent success at Western Texas College with shortened developmental courses. We put them through 8 weeks, and our success rate going into college algebra, for example, is about 80%. And so it works very well for us. Now, this is not online. So, this is not the demographic we're looking at, but it can work, and for us it does work. Now, we don't do developmental online, and that's an interesting approach that we've never been able to make work. So I would be glad to hear how the other institutions are doing it. One that I haven't heard mentioned yet, this is part of student success, point 6. Academic coaching and an intervention process to improve retention. We've been looking at this as an institution, and one of the biggest drawbacks is the really good programs that are available are not cheap. I mean, we're talking $30,000 a year, and an institution with 2,400 enrollment can afford a $30,000 a year program that will help us with success and retention. So we have to come up with a better way, either a combined purchasing at a state level or something to enable us to utilize a program like this so that we can really focus on what are the issues that students are facing, not just grades, not just attendance, but what are the other issues that that stand in their way? Is it social problems? Is it whatever? Family problems. I mean, there are all these issues that contribute to their success or failure, and we need to look at all of that. And the one comment I'd like to make, Matt made an interesting observation about looking at the higher level courses, the graduate, postgraduate area. We have an amazing number of schools in this room. I'm sitting between a school that has 30,000 enrollment and a school that has about 5,000 enrollment, and we have about 2,400, which is about where Panola is. A lot of the discussions that we have in this room focus on institutions that have 10, 20, 30,000 students. And some of the things that we come up with don't necessarily apply to institutions that have much fewer students. So as we look at the list that we're going to present, I think we should look at it and think, okay, how does this affect all of the schools that we represent in the state? How does it affect the small schools? Is this going to impact them negatively, or is it going to impact the larger schools negatively? Because if we put a recommendation in place and it becomes part of something that the legislature does, and it impacts any of our institutions, then that's not a good thing. We all want student success, but if we're not here as an institution, we can't guarantee that. So that's it for me.
Amy. Thank you, Roy. Thank you, Roy.
Okay. I will again reemphasize some of the things many of you have already said, but just to echo, I marked 4 areas that are most important to me. First, educational quality. I think we've got to start there. I had marked the standards of excellence across the board in online courses, standardized. Now, that's not a popular word, but some fashion where students are prepared for the next level of courses and know what they're getting into, and effective faculty training in course design, pedagogy, and the technology is a must in the educational quality. One thing I might add, and I didn't know quite where to put this, but one thing that kept coming to mind, and Roy just hit home as well, so many of our rural areas, we just at Little Howard College, we reach 27 different high schools on a daily basis at the same time, and for most of those students, online course delivery is their first introduction to college. And so that's kind of I don't know where to put that other than it's something to always be considered, that as students are starting out in online courses at a younger age, that's their first introduction to college. Many of the things we've discussed here, it's important to remember they're starting out their sophomore, junior years of high school with many of our institutions. So just to keep that in mind. The second area of importance that I noted is student success. Once we get our courses designed and their quality, I think then we've got to make sure how are our students ready for those courses, and that involves either orientations or what's the program? Our programs to make sure they're ready for those courses. And then also the support services are a must. I know I'm repeating things, but Roy brought up the academic coaching intervention. Any early alert systems that we can put in place, I think, need to be there. Probably a little bit different for your online than for some of your face-to-face courses. Okay. Third, once we have your faculty successful, your students are successful, we have to have a more effective way of tracking and reporting data across the board. It's got to be user-friendly for the smaller institutions as well as the larger ones that can afford. We can't afford to hire programmers just for the state reporting. And so but it seems to be that with the more and more reports, you have to have very specialized individuals, and they just don't want to live in Snyder or Big Spring. I don't know why, but I do. So anyway, I'm teasing. I won't get off. And then the fourth area, just within the other issues, I have to reiterate the transferability. And it's not, we do very well, I think, with core courses and we work very well with universities, but with online learning, I think it's important, again, to remember if they can transfer easily into some of these online programs at the higher levels, that's going to be a win-win for everyone. Students, oftentimes in rural Texas, and I'm talking, the very rural South and some of those populations we're trying to reach, they don't want to move. They prefer to live at home and help their family. So I think it's important to remember that the transferability, and maybe that's not the right word to use, but maybe just the transparent pathways is a better thing to make sure that they can move from one level to the next, feel comfortable, confident in the courses they're taking, I think is very important.
Are you talking more specifically about curriculum alignment?
It has to be that,
pathways.
Right, that, and just the standardization also works in that, so they're comfortable with the technology involved.
Right.
Just from my personal experiences with the high school students, they really thought, and it's a really good course, but they did not think they ever interacted with their instructor in that online course, and I had to take them to the lab and point out that the computer they're talking to, that is their instructor, and this was their first experience in an online course, and they loved it, but they didn't understand that's your instructor anyway, and it was a very good course. So I just think some training, and I just remembered that stuck in my head, is that this is their first college course they've ever had, and we have, because it was such a rural high school, that's the only time those students could take college algebra, and it happened to be an online course. And again, so those are just some things that I think are important.
Lauren, please.
So this is an incredible document that I hadn't seen before, of course, until today. So gracias. So I guess as a first charge, I would say driving change, what Matt was talking about, the redesign of the formula funding model to incent online program growth. That's kind of an exciting idea. And to also to encourage a minimum participation in online courses. I don't know if that needs to be a mandate, but that's also a very exciting idea to me to drive the change. And then,
do you mean minimum class size?
No.
I'm sorry, what are you referring to?
Minimum participation in online education.
Oh, I see. Like some of these, okay.
Right.
I thought you were going on to a different topic there.
No,
but I
I'm not
see.
changing
Okay.
the topic.
Okay.
On any of these, I'm drawing from this document, of
Right.
any of my choices.
Right.
But that was those two incentives were a first choice, just to push the change a little. And
I just wanted to clarify what you were saying. Thanks.
sure. And then with the state and institutional policy, we made an attempt at Sherry made an attempt at Texas A&M to put together this shared course, and it's taking off slowly, but it's just a fantastic idea to share classes. And so if we can promote interinstitutional development of coursework and shared courses, I think that's a great idea in the context of the nonprofits that are just, bombarding us. Then also the in educational resources and materials, promoting the notion of open source is a biggie, I think. We're so driven by publishers and the notion of proprietary information and whatnot, while at the same time we need to be changing philosophically in the direction of open source. So I think that's an important direction to take. With educational quality, always a big concern. The issue of certification is important. How is it? What would that constitute? Should there be certification? Is it a barrier? Would certification be a barrier to online that folks who teach face-to-face don't have to jump over? So the concern, I think, just a very sincere discussion of the pros and cons of certifying faculty for online teaching. In higher ed, faculty have never had to be certified to teach before. So, are we going to go that direction with online or not? And then with quality, educational quality, the notion of packaging instruction and sharing it is, of course, a big idea in online education. Therefore, packaged instruction is there's a danger of packaging discrete skill instruction as opposed to meaningful problem-based, inquiry-based, case-based instruction. So the importance of pedagogy becomes so very real in the distance ed environment. So developing guidelines, that first idea under educational quality seems to me to be particularly important, and what those guidelines are is a little bit of a scary topic, I think, because we just don't want to get into discrete skill instruction. And then in the student success, the online orientation notion is exciting. Designing an online orientation that helps students know how to learn online, great idea. And I just left a workshop on retention, and academic coaching was strongly recommended. So the alert system idea that Amy was addressing identifying ways to learn early on that a student's having trouble, and then designing intervention systems that respond to those alerts.
That it?
That's it.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we all owe Randy an apology because he's the last guy to go.
We've taken all his ideas.
He's been waiting so patiently.
Oh, I owe y'all the apology because I have the luxury of hearing all of y'all's great ideas.
Well, I'm sorry somebody had to go last, but maybe that's an advantage.
Well, I've been sitting here thinking, and I'm going to apologize to Van before I even say this because last time I suggested something like this, it seemed like I wanted other people to do the work than us. But here's my thoughts on hearing all of this. And I'm going to break the pattern here just for a little bit because I have nothing to add to all the great ideas that have been put out there. But what I'm hearing are, and maybe this is thinking too far down the road, but I'm envisioning that our product out of this might be at least two separate lists. One of those lists would just be best practices for folks like us to take home and others in the state to use. A lot of the things that we're talking about are real good ideas. They would make our distance education better. They would help student success. They would help faculty be better online instructors and that kind of thing. So those are a list of best practices, and many ideas have been mentioned today. But the other is really a step of actions for, I'll say, the Texas government to take. And as it was coming around the table, the thought that came to my mind was this. I think we need to be careful to highlight things in our report or our suggestions, to suggest things that the government can do to help us in our fight to advance distance education for the benefit of students. Not make suggestions to them that they can turn around and require us to do. Okay? So we have, for example, well, I don't know if I can think of an example now, but some things about come up with a system to analyze whether students are required to or whether they're ready to enroll in a distance course. And there's been many. You could take any one of these best practices. If the legislature turns around and starts requiring that on us, then I think what's been said by some is it may not fit one institution or another, or it's going to be different in several ways in the different places. So I'm a bit hesitant to give them a list of best practices and say, okay, here, legislation here, laters, here's a bunch of good things. Now y'all start requiring us to do all this. For one, that's going to be very impractical because anything they require us to do, they're going to have to turn around and monitor. There's going to be reports. Are they going to inspect us to see if we're really doing it? It's going to be done in 50 different flavors. So I'm not sure how useful that's going to be. I want to point back to Matt and his 5 suggestions to me go exactly along with what I'm thinking here of. We want to suggest things that the government can do or legislation. Things that the state can do that would make it easier for all of us to analyze distance education, or it would make it easier for us to cooperate with each other better, or make it easier for students to take distance education and that kind of thing. And I can't even remember what all Matt's points were off the top of my head. That was number 1, tie it to money. And did you mention data? Coming to agreement on definitions and some data sets. And then Roy followed that up. I'd like to highlight his first comment too was we have to be careful though when they identify the data that we're going to give them, how that's defined. You have to be careful about exactly what is required. And just as another example of that, when we started addressing this 57 piece of legislation it said define graduation rates. Well, I've never thought deeply about that. A graduation rate's a graduation rate. But you ask our institutional research person on campus, and they're like, well, what do you mean? And how are you, graduation of which group? When do you start? When do you stop? And all these factors that I never even considered. So I'm for them laying these kind of definitions on us, but like Roy said, you have to be very careful. It's got to be something that we can do and that we can handle and easily give back to the state. So that varies maybe a little bit on the format of what you wanted to hear, but I think we have to be careful about what our end product is going to be here. I think this group could probably come up with a wonderful list of best practices for ourselves and our suggestions to our colleagues out there. We think you ought to do these things and your distance ed experience will be improved. But to the legislators, when Van said, sometimes they're confronted and they need a very specific suggestion to make, okay, here's what our Texas distance ed leaders think should be done. I think that needs to be things for them to do, not here's what we think you need to turn around and mandate on us. So let's just be careful in the reports and suggestions that we come up with. I think if we have 5 suggestions like Matt was saying, and maybe there's a couple of others that were not on Matt's list that could go on a list of 7 or 10 or something. But I think if we are careful to make those suggestions, that would be very helpful to someone like Van when she says, yes, here's a very specific thing that you can do. Change your formula, or identify this data, or whatever the other suggestions were. Thank you.
I think it's an interesting concept that you're bringing up. I think, and maybe I haven't thought about it too much because it's relatively new the way that you've stated it, but it seems to me like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to me to be a very thin line to walk between making a recommendation for what we want the legislature to do and how we prevent that from turning around and having the legislature mandate measures on the colleges and universities as a result of asking the legislature, as a result of telling the legislature what we want to have done. I mean, maybe outside of Matt's money thing, which I think is rising in prominence as we go along, but it just seems to me to be a very thin line to stop it at that point of making of asking the legislature do this, and have it stop there and not have it reflect back on the colleges and have a mandate on the colleges to be able to do that as a result. That's just a thought. I may be wrong, but that was just
but it's about upfront cost. If you want this, and there's clearly an interest, the timing is great in terms of the interest of using this delivery mechanism to reach students across the state. Mm-hmm. The argument is there's an upfront cost. This stuff isn't free.
Right.
So invest in it.
Right. No, I agree, and I think I'm saying that Matt's money point may be the exception to this, one of the easier ones to do. Sherry?
I just want to comment. I agree with Randy and Matt, but I think there's a balance. I think you can have a balance. I know you're thinking it's a fine line, and maybe once we get into this document a little bit, we can find that balance. But I do think, Randy, you're going to have some pieces of it where maybe mandate is the stronger word that we're looking at, but like your collaborative pricing and some of those other things that the government or the state legislators ought to be helping us do in getting those kinds of things done for us. But if a byproduct of that is I hate to use the word mandate, but if a byproduct is something along those lines, maybe it's not a bad thing. I think we should go down the path that you're talking about and be careful what we ask for, because we want to balance it. We want to make sure we're doing that the right way. So.
No, I agree, and it's probably a better way of stating what I was trying to say. So ineloquently or whatever, non-eloquently.
Yeah,
there's a balance there. Yeah, go ahead, Randy.
I agree. Thin line and balance. But I go back and look at what our own subcommittee came up with. We're talking about student success. Great ideas for student success, but number one, for example, to help ensure student success, we should have sound instructional design following nationally accepted principles of good practice. Well, of course we should. And all of our colleagues would agree, and that's what we should encourage each other to do. But if we say that to the legislators, what are they going to do with that? Are they going to start inspecting us again like we did 10 years ago to see if we use some kind of principles of good practice, or are they going to enforce that some way? I'm wondering at this point in the evolution of distance ed in the state, how picky we want to get about some of these things that are best practices as far as having them inspect us and check us off on various things, or if our efforts wouldn't be better spent, trying to come up with collective government things that we can't do ourselves. For example, we can't affect the formula. That's going to have to be somebody else. So that's our recommendation to them. Or we can't affect the transfer so much. We can work individually on that, but if there's to be a statewide transfer ruling or to smooth out that process or something, that's got to come from a government level, right? We can only accomplish so much, if I understand what Matt's suggestion was. So I just think we need to be careful. Let's be careful about what is a best practice and then what is a legislative step that could be done that would help all of us.
Okay, I agree with that. But at this point in time, 10, 12, 15 years later, we got to do something. Because if we don't push that envelope a little bit and get those legislators to do some things that we need done, we're going to be back here talking about the same thing, doing the round table. So I agree wholeheartedly. I know there's got to be a balance, but by gosh, let's go in there. If this is the voice, let's do it. Let's push that envelope a little bit. So I turn it back to Van and I say, what, from this discussion, what are you looking for as far as the paper that you're, is Randy's suggestion the path that we probably ought to be taking and giving them a little bit of this and a little bit of that? Or what were you planning to have out of this at this point in time? I guess that's what I'm wondering.
What was that?
You're used to it.
Yeah. The way I see it, we know that distance education is going to be an issue in the session. It was an issue last time. It's going to be an issue this time. I think one of the things that's motivating that is discussions of affordability and cost effectiveness, and whether appropriate or not, distance education comes up when those discussions of cost effectiveness come up. I want this committee to be able to play a part in shaping that discussion. If you don't shape that, if you don't play a part, then the discussion is going to be shaped for you. And I'm uncomfortable with that. I think that this group consists of some of the best people in the state when it comes to thinking about distance education in all of its forms. And I think that one of the strengths of this group is its variety. We've got large universities and we've got small community colleges. And, Roy and Amy are right on the money, I think. What works for the large schools isn't going to work for the small schools. And, I think, Amy, you were the one that pointed out that for many kids out in West Texas and in other areas like the Panhandle where there's not a community college anywhere near them in several hundred miles, their first taste of college is through distance education. And that is a significant shift in the way that things used to be. And it makes what happens online and what happens with distance ed even more important. When we hear, Mark, when I hear you say that you've got institutions that are asking you, well, did this student take this class online? Because if they did, we're not going to accept it for transfer. That's problematic. There are issues of quality that still come up repeatedly. I spoke 2 weeks ago to the Texas Community College Instructional Administrators Association. And one of the things that I shared with them was the results of the Sloan C study last year, part of their annual study. And as a part of that study, they looked at nationally what were administrators saying about the quality of online education. And although more administrators are saying that they think that it's as good as or better than face-to-face, the majority still are saying that they don't think that it's as good as or better than face-to-face. Yet we know that when it's done well, it can surpass what happens in the classroom, especially those large classrooms with 300 and 400 students in them. So, what I really want to see come out of this committee and with this paper is a document that really clearly lays out, here are the challenges that online educators are facing. Here are the major challenges that this state faces if we're going to sit down and have a serious conversation about distance ed. And here are the things that can help us move in that direction to make sure that what we have is a quality education that will be accessible to everyone, because distance ed, cost effectiveness is still out there, whether or not it's cost effective or not. But what no one argues with is the fact that distance ed drives accessibility to people who would never have an education otherwise. And I think all of us want to make sure that as more and more people draw on distance ed, that what they get is the best possible education possible and that they're successful. Because we also know that when we get 18-year-olds going into online courses, sometimes they don't have the maturity to be successful. So if there are things that we need to do to stack the deck in their favor, this report would be a good one to bring it out. And if that means making recommendations that institutions should have some form of online orientation, or if it means making recommendations that faculty that teach online should undergo a certain type of professional development. If there are best practices that you think need to be out there, put them out there in this document. I understand your concerns, Randy, about wanting to make sure that the legislature doesn't legislate what you do at Stephen F. Austin. I understand, trust me. I look at the legislation that I've seen come across my desk the last couple of years. I don't think there's a high risk that we're going to have a bill that says that every faculty member that teaches online has to be certified. I don't think that some of the best practices that you guys have been talking about today, I don't think we run the risk of those being legislated. That's a level of minutia that I don't think that they normally address, and let's face it, there's a big budget crisis going into this session. But if your report can not only help us say, here are the biggest issues that the state is facing, here are the things that we need to do to help our practitioners, and then if I've also got a document that we can hand to folks that are newly stepping into your role, and say, you want to start a really good online program? This paper says, here are the biggest things that you need to think about, and here are the practices you need to implement. That would be really useful. There is seldom a week that goes by now that I don't get somebody asking me, what are the best practices that I need to implement at my campus? So this document, I think, could do both of those things. And again, Randy, I understand and empathize with your desire to make sure that you don't get over legislated. I honestly don't think that's going to happen. When you look at what we've done at the coordinating board during the 5 years that I've been here, we've actually stepped back the amount of reports that you've turned into us and the amount of things that we've looked at. And that is a commitment that our commissioner holds. It's a commitment that our deputy commissioner holds. It's a commitment that my assistant commissioner holds. And, as a part of the Sunset Review, we handed over to the Sunset Committee a whole list of things that we suggested that we no longer be required to do in terms of reporting that you give to us. So I don't think that you're going to get more interference. What I do hope, though, is that if we're going to have a discussion about distance ed in this state, I want you guys to be the folks that help frame it, because you know it better than anyone else. And I don't want your voices to be lost. And I don't want to be in the position of being the only one advocating for your voices, or Kay being the only one advocating for your voices, because y'all can do it better than us.
I think, too, that on the flip side of that, it's good for the institutions, but it's also good for the legislatures to have a context to have those best practices defined and give them a perspective, especially when you hear how many are going to be new to their roles, possibly this legislative session, and don't have that past history. Then it can really kind of contribute to, how do they bring those up? Because, what we all know is they think that distance ed is cheap, but they don't know those background, they don't know the context of those costs and things. So I think this is a document that could lay out some of those things and say, yeah, these things can be done. But there is also, it's not just a caveat for everything, and it's not going to be the saving grace for what situation we find ourselves in. So I think some of that, balance between the best practices and then a context defined by us, because if we leave it up to them to define it, you've got a lot of novice, or may have some novice people that are defining which they don't really know. And so I think
and the context, I completely agree. And the context that needs to be defined, in addition to those best practices, are good substantiated research studies, which says this is something that has been thoroughly researched. This is something that can be substantiated by data. It's not just our, like we talked about when we started out this session this afternoon, it's not just our say-so. And we may represent the distance ed programs in the country. We may be experts in the state on this kind of thing, but the best way to substantiate what we're doing is to back it up with research and best practices. And I completely agree with the comments that you made.
When we talk about the last meeting, when we were talking about setting the limits for the reviews and the low-performing programs, they were basically just arbitrarily saying we're going to be as good as other states, and it wasn't rolling it back to, well, what is the best common practice? Not just because we're going to be one up from Kentucky or Florida. I think that's where we can kind of define that, rather than having them just say, we're just going to draw a line here.
Van, I'm sorry, Kingston.
I want to ask a question which is sort of based on experience from elsewhere, where exercises of this nature really entail the writing of two separate reports, a very detailed technical report that becomes the basis of good practice amongst practitioners, and a somewhat thinner report that captures the essence of the technical document, and that will be the document that goes to the legislature.
Yeah, I think I agree with Randy on many of the points he said, and I also know Van's correct in that they won't go for the minutia, but because of the budget situation that we are encountering and looking at looking at student success and apportionment and everything else, there are a few points that, as I look over the list, we probably should be weary. Instead of knowing what should be included, there are a couple that we should be weary of including. And I'm looking at things like student success, point 1 and point 3, the ones of adopting methods for screening student suitability and mandatory online orientations. Those are great best practices, but those are two that could possibly come back as mandates at some point, saying, if you do this, and for some institutions, they may not have the financial resources to be able to implement it. And also number 7 in that same category, where it's each institution should include student success metrics in their online courses. Again, we should, but if they mandated that would be a severe paradigm shift on certain institutions on how they do it and everything else. And that could be more cost prohibitive than cost saving. So otherwise, the other things that we have mentioned, whether it was textbooks or training of faculty or anything else, even if they were included in there, and should the legislature say anything about that or mandate, I don't think it really would adversely impact us. I think it would be helpful. But these in particular, I think, would be the ones that might be costly.
Okay. Van, I have one other issue that I know was mentioned once or twice, but I want to make sure it's also on this list for consideration, and that is the one related to learning analytics. I know it is on there. Okay, I just want to make sure it got there. Okay, because that to me is a lot of institutions are not doing it right now, but I think it's going to loom larger and larger as we move in the next couple of years ahead. The New Media Consortium and the Horizon report really clearly outlines that, and last year outlined it as something that was about 5 years down the line. I think it's revised it now to be about 3 years down the line. So learning analytics is going to be looming larger for us all. Well, we only have about 20 minutes left. Yes, Paula.
One thing that's been totally absent from our discussion has been ADA compliance. And isn't it a very, very important part of accessibility in general?
Mm-hmm. I think that wasn't that on the original?
I know it was in our discussions.
No.
I just haven't heard it mentioned today.
It's been in here, but
Right.
in terms of discussion.
But it hasn't been emphasized by anybody in the group.
It's in the report,
Right. It's
the
in the
summary
report,
synopsis, but it was in the subgroups, but we just haven't discussed it today.
To me, it's one of the things that is very costly, and many of us don't have the expertise, especially at the smaller institutions. But I guess we're a mid-size, and we still have had to develop some expertise in that area. It's not easy to get. Yet that's something. I know there's several suits right now, particularly with blind students. We have a large deaf education program, and so we deal with it probably more than most people. But still, as we're talking about best practices, particularly instructional design, I think we need to be aware that that's one of our criteria that really just has to be there. And
Although it is a nationally, federally mandated thing already.
Right, but
the implementation, the effective implementation of it is
our
I think where you're going.
response to it. And I know recently we thought that scripting was fine for videos, and they have said now that the technology has come along, so scripting is no longer enough. It needs to be closed captioned.
Right.
So that, in our case, triggered a very expensive software purchase, and so I just think it should be at the table in some shape or form.
Randy, real quick.
Well, that's just a very good example. Yes, it's already there. It was in our Principles of Good Practice. It's nationally standard. We should all be doing it. But that's one thing that the state could help us do. Maybe establish some little statewide center, and we could all run our courses or our scenarios through this, and they could help us and check off on it and certify it or whatever, and they could help us, rather than each one of us investing, duplicating that effort, maybe not knowing what we're doing, maybe wasting money, and putting the state at risk for a lawsuit. That's something that the government could do to help us, rather than if we just say, put that as a best practice, they're going to turn around and say, yeah, it's a best practice to do it. Well, we're in the same place that we were.
Perhaps it ought to be in the category of economies of scale and software licensing and things like that. Because I think that's where you're going with that anyway. Is that right, Randy?
I probably was.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Well, in the time we have left, really, I think that the final task is for us to, I don't know if we can summarize everything we've got right now, but we do have a couple of major issues emerging. I was going to ask you what your color coding was referring to. And then we can see what steps we're going to take in between this meeting and the next meeting to move this project forward. So why don't you go ahead and explain the color coding, and then we can take it from there.
Okay, so what I did was, and of course I probably can't make this work now from here. Yeah.
See it?
No, I can't see. All right, so what I did was, there's a very rough color coding that's up there. I took what seemed to be the major areas that folks had talked about so far, and color coded them so that you could get a sense of which ones were coming up with frequency. So the bright lime green here is data, and is data and metrics. And you'll see that that comes up in several places. So I would suggest that that's one major theme that the report needs to address based upon what you've said. The red here is OER and common textbooks, and you'll see in common course materials, and you'll see that that's another one that comes up with some frequency. So I would also suggest that that be one that the report looks at. Those are the two that come up the most. Now, then there's several that come up roughly the same amount. We may be able to do some combinations. So the sort of aqua here is flex enrollment or rolling enrollment courses. That one comes up a few times. This magenta color, I think I'm getting my colors right. This magenta color is collective bargaining, which I think comes up quite a bit and would suggest that based upon the conversation that we just had about where are places that the state can help, this might be one of those areas that you want to talk about in the report. Dark green is developmental education. We do have another committee here at the board that is doing a report on developmental education and is taking into account online technologies and developmental education and modularization. Certainly, if you guys feel that there's something specific that you can add to it, by all means, but I want to make sure that you know that there's another group within the agency that is working on a legislatively mandated report on this issue. So if you decide to not touch it, it certainly is not going to get lost. It's going to be covered. The gold color here is faculty training and pedagogy. And it shows up a little bit. The gray color, which shows up quite a bit, are student services and student success. And I sort of lumped together screening services, online orientation, what sort of services should students have. Learner analytics falls within here as well. And I want to echo what Steve has just said. Not only is learner analytics something that has shown up in the last 2 years of the Horizons report, but last week I was in Seattle at the Gates post-secondary convening, and it was an issue that showed up frequently over the course of the discussions those 3 days about learner analytics and the importance of learner analytics. It's certainly something that we're aware of and interested in inside the agency, and I'll be actually working on a project that has this as a component to it. So I think Steve's right that it is something that has come up the last couple of years, and it's clear to me from the conversations I heard last week that the Horizon report, when they said it was 5 years off, was probably being over conservative. I think it's here.
I think so, too.
And we're just going to see more and more of it. So the gray piece is learner analytics and student success. The dark purple piece is evaluation of courses. So those are all of the colors there. It's our own little rainbow. Whenever I scrolled through this, what I see just by the color coding that seems to come up the most frequently is data. What data metrics should be collected? How can it be reported? How can it be done and when we say what data should be collected, what data should be collected that every institution should be able to provide us without it being difficult or onerous to them, regardless of their size? And how do we ask for it? And what do we do with it? So that seems to come up over and over and over again. Issues of open educational resources and electronic resources seem to come up over and over and over again. Collective purchasing and ways to leverage the state's size seems to come up over and over and over again, whether that be collective purchasing of LMS or whether, as Randy pointed out, that means some sort of collective work to develop a system that will help script or will help transcribe for ADA compliance. But are there places where there need to be centralized services so that not every institution is having to develop something over and over and over again? Where's the economy? Because we do talk about economies of scale when we talk to distance ed, and this is one of the places where we can be leveraging economy that we're probably not leveraging it. So I see that purchasing and that economy of scale coming up here over and over again. I see student success and analytics coming up. And then I also, when I skim back through this, the other big one that emerges are quality. And that can be both faculty quality as well as course assessment. So those are the big themes that I see come up when we look through this, and I color-coded it.
Is your course quality, is that the gold?
Yeah, course quality, actually, course quality is, gold is faculty.
Right.
And course quality is purple.
Oh, okay.
Those two might be able to be folded together, though, because they are fairly similar.
That's why I was asking. Okay. Well, from what you're saying, Van, it seems as though we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, perhaps 5 if we fold 2 of them together, like you just said.
Which is kind of where I thought we might end up.
Oh.
I thought we might find that there were 5 or 6 big ones that repeated themselves.
Okay, and those are, and you know what, maybe if you, after the meeting, obviously some other time, but if you can group the color codes together,
yeah, I
that'd
will.
be helpful, and then put a color,
and send it out.
A key in there too, a color key in there.
Yeah.
Because right now I'm just working from scribbled notes as to what all the colors mean. But we have data and metrics. We have OER, open learning objects, open source. That's number 2. Well, I'm not ranking them. Just saying that's the second one. We have economies of scale, collective purchasing issues. We have faculty training, pedagogy, and perhaps join that together with course evaluation and course quality as a 4th one. And then the 5th one, which is the gray highlighted one, is student services, student success, online orientation, and we threw learning analytics into that as well, with the overall student services and student success issues. Does that collectively seem, as a group, the direction that we want to go in, either in terms of best practices or doing further research? Keeping all the comments, and particularly some of Randy's comments about how we recommend these things and how they're treated by the legislature. Does those topics seem to be the ones to go with at this point? Comment. Yes, Matt. Thumbs up. Oh, it's a thumbs up. Okay, good. Any thumbs down? Okay. Do we want to try in 5 to 10 minutes to create assignment groups?
Yes, because nothing will happen otherwise.
Okay, good.
I know my mic was on for that one.
We get a thumbs
You
up.
go on record for saying that.
Yes, I will go on record for saying that.
Okay, well,
Both
let me
will.
just put it this way then. if we do go that route, and I think we're going to go that route, this is a commitment from everybody. Even though we're probably going to ask for an individual to lead each group, it's going to have to be a pretty participative kind of thing where everybody's going to have to join in, everybody's going to have to help. Kingston, you may be off the hook. I'm not sure, but we'll see. But we do have new members who will be coming in too.
We do. We will have new members coming in August.
Okay, so those lucky folks are going to get assigned something here.
So what I would suggest is what we would be looking for in the short run, say in the next month, is an outline of what the major pieces are to each of these points, as well as the beginning of a bibliography. And the bibliography, I would suggest, should be divided into two sections. One would be research and one would be resources. So, for example, if you're looking at OER, your bibliography might include a study on the effectiveness of open educational resources by Creative Commons, but it might also include a reference and citation to Connections at Rice. That would be a resource. And that, I think, begins to help address what folks have brought up as both the research need as well as the resource need.
Do the best practices fit under the resources area?
Yes, best practices would fit under resources too. So I think what we would be looking for in the next 4 to 6 weeks would be an outline of the major issues and resources and best practices. I'd like to, and then once we have that, we can begin to build those out and put the meat on them. I would say that by August, when we meet again, it would be nice for each one of these sections to have 3 or 4 pages of text. Shouldn't be difficult considering how big they are. And then we can use that text to begin to edit it and see what's missing. When we meet in August or September, and then that'll give us something with meat to revise for the final report. Do we have volunteers who want to work on data and metrics?
Marshall's not here. He should be.
I'll let you tell him that, Sherry.
Always give it to the person who's not here.
All right. Roy, who wants to work with Roy on data? You're all going to have to work on something before you get out the door. Just FYI. I'm not letting you out the room.
Amy?
Roy?
Can you explain more? What do you mean, who wants to work on data? What will they be doing exactly?
I think on data, so what we've seen come up is folks trying to get a handle of what sort of metrics are usually captured to talk about quality of distance education as well as cost effectiveness, looking at what metrics we already capture here in the state, making recommendations for is there other data that should be captured at the state level, and if so, what is that, and is it going to be feasible for institutions of different sizes to do so?
And the best way to standardize that data also, or those data, also, so that we're not having an apples and oranges issue, and some recommendations as to frequency of reports and when those reports need to be generated. Sorry, go ahead, Randy.
Okay, so we've got Roy, Amy, and Randy there. Could you guys, before you leave, one of you decide who's going to take the head role on that in terms of communicating back? Roy, okay.
Amy's indicating that it's going to be Roy.
All right. Who do we have who would like to talk about economies of scale? And that really just means the idea of collective bargaining agreements, collective purchasing agreements, that sort of thing. Sherry?
Okay.
Daniel? Jerry? Anyone else? And Ron? Which one of you would be willing to take point on that? Ron?
Okay.
I'll share it with someone, but
Don't know this.
Yeah, you want to.
But I will be around. I will be around long.
Yeah, you will.
okay, well, I'll
Yeah.
take most of the
Through
blame.
August. After August, what I was going to say, I'll be off the committee after August. But what I can do until then.
Ron and I'll share that.
I know, I'm just joking.
And so Daniel's on it, and who else?
Jerry. Okay, great.
So Sherry, you're going to,
Sherry and Ron are going to
Ron,
take point
okay.
down on that.
We'll do it.
All right. Student success and learner analytics. I'm guessing that's you, Steve?
actually, I was going to go for the open source.
Oh, okay. All right. Student success and learner analytics. Who wants to work on that one? Okay, Paula? Who else? She can't be a committee of one. All right, we'll make Marshall work on it with you.
There we go.
And
Now you're
Bhagya.
talking.
Oh.
And we forgot about
Yeah,
Bhagya.
we'll
That's
put Marshall
right.
and Bhagya on there. All right, course and faculty quality.
Wait, who's going to spearhead the
Well, by default right now, Paula.
Paula? Okay.
Okay. Okay, course and faculty quality. We've got Ann. Who else? We've got Dawn. Anyone else? Okay.
Mark.
And Mark. And which one of you wants to be point on that? Mark.
Mark.
So which one of you wants to be point on that? Mark does.
Mark. Thank you, Mark.
You snooze, you lose, Mark. All right, so that means the rest of you are on
Who
OER.
besides me?
So that's Steve, Paul, Patrick, and Brent.
And who? Brett? Okay.
Oh,
Brett?
I've got Nick.
Brett, yeah.
Spearhead?
Needs to be on something.
Okay.
Okay, who?
Do we?
Who
else isn't here today?
Nate is the only one that's not here.
Okay. How about Nate? Let's assign Nate. We have 3. Right.
Oh, I've got it down here.
Okay for this?
Yeah.
Bibliography gone and
I can do it actually.
Just to give you Just send me the link. Just send me the link. I'll figure it out.
Okay. Putting Nate. We're going to put Nate.
Renee.
Okay.
So Renee is added to the course quality
Yeah.
pedagogy faculty
Yeah.
training.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we'll communicate that to them. So, folks, if what we will do is set up we'll set up portions for each of these pieces in the wiki. If you don't know how to get into it, email Gay or I, and we will refresh your memory. We'll have working pages up for you by the end of the week, hopefully sooner than that, so that you can use that wiki as a common space to work collaboratively. We'll send out more information and remind you, but I think if we could go for a goal of, this is the 18th, this is June 18th, if we could have a goal of maybe by August 1st, having a pretty good draft, a pretty good outline of your section, as well as at least a beginning bibliography of research and resources. That would be very good, and that will give us time to take a look at it, see if we see any holes in it, see if there's anything that we can help you do as CB staff, and make sure that everything looks like it's going to fit together. And then we'll have something to start in on whenever we meet again.
And that will be in September?
Be in September, probably mid-September.
Okay. So by August 1st, that's, it's the same date that the Rider 57 report is done. Do we still want to amend that a little bit?
No.
Please. No.
No.
He doesn't. Okay. He doesn't. Oh, you buck.
He owe me $5.
All right. Is that it? Do we
That's
have any
it.
other business?
I think that's
Okay.
it.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I
We need
really
a motion
appreciate
to
it.
adjourn.
I was just about to do that. Need a motion to adjourn, so I need Mark. I like Mark stepped right up and did that. And do we have a second? Mark, you can't second your own motion. I'm sorry. Jerry did. Okay, thank you. All in favor of closing the session, I guess, would please say aye. All opposed? No one? Aye is not the answer. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. Thank you for all your participation.